call the Saline City Council meeting to order. Please rise and join us for the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. You have a slightly revised agenda in front of you. I think there were two fairly innocuous additions. It'll appear at the tail end of the agenda. The previous copy did not denote our upcoming meetings, which are on December the 5th, and then our last meeting of the year on December 19th, along with a brief work meeting at 6 on the 19th to discuss community events. Members present this evening are Council Members Kamara Sulak, CO, Delorco, Dillon, Kraus, Mayor Pro Tem Gearbaugh, and myself, Mayor Marl. From City staff, we have City Manager O'Toole, Clerk Royal, Assistant City Manager Getzman, Network Administrator Schonk, Parks and Rec Director Scruggs, DPW Director Searles, Police Chief Radzik, Community Development Director Harrington. Who else am I missing from city staff? We have Sunshine Lambert, also from Parks and Rec, and numerous police officers, including Sergeant Bolter. At this time, the chair would entertain a motion to approve the agenda as distributed, or as submitted, unless there are amendments.
There is one amendment. We will be rescheduling the action for amending the loom purchase agreement.
For the audience's benefit, City Manager O'Toole, which agenda item is that? Okay, so 22-288, we'll just entertain a motion to postpone to our next regular meeting?
Correct.
Okay. So we will deal with that when we get to the second item under new business. Then noting that modification, is there a motion to approve the agenda as amended?
So moved.
Moved by Gearbaugh, seconded by Dillon. All those in favor of approving the agenda as amended signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, say nay. Ayes have it. The motion carries unanimously. There are no absences this evening, so we'll proceed to citizen comments on agenda items. Under the Open Meetings Act, any citizen may come forward at this time, make comment or question on an item that appears on this agenda. Comments will be limited to 3 minutes per person. Anyone who would like to speak is requested but not required to state his or her name and address for the record. Are there any citizen comments from those in the audience this evening? Clerk Royal, were there any comments received in writing? Okay. Easy enough. Then we proceed to the first of two presentations, the first of which is the swearing in of our newest police officer, Officer Clark. Clerk Royal, I believe, will come forward, and Chief Radzik, would you also like to come forward and maybe share a few remarks? I don't see the cordless microphone by chance. Is that? It's in the back. Chief Radzik, why don't you wait until the cordless microphone has been delivered? Mr. Goodman has it.
Check.
I go first?
Yeah, why don't you go first, Chief Radzik, and introduce our newest officer and share any other additional remarks that you deem appropriate.
This is Officer Charles Clark. He goes by Charlie, so now we have two Charlies here at the city. This is his father. You want to introduce your dad?
Yeah, this is my dad, Don Clark.
And I just wanted to say I'm very happy to have Officer Clark on board. He's a graduate from U of M with a bachelor's degree. He attended Schoolcraft, got his associates, and he went to the Wayne County Regional Police Academy and graduated in 2016. So he is a great addition to our team, and we're happy to have him.
Very good. Officer Clark, in addition to your dad, do you have any other friends, family that are in the audience that you'd like to introduce?
I have my dad, my sister, my mom right there, and then my cousin, Steve, right there.
Very good.
And
Excellent.
he's with the Dearborn Police Department.
Oh, wonderful. Well, thank you for joining us. Chief Radzik, unless you have anything else, Clerk Roy, would you like to administer the oath?
My Charlie approves of him too, so.
That's an inside joke for those of you in the audience. Our second Charlie is a dog who frequents the office. It's the city clerk's dog, and he's a wonderful addition to our team here. We love him.
I'm going to have you raise your right hand. Do you solemnly swear or affirm that you will support the Constitution of the United States and the Constitution of this state, and that you will faithfully perform the duties of office of police officer in and for the city of Saline, county of Washtenaw, and state of Michigan, according to the best of your ability, so help you God?
I do. anything else you'd like to share?
Yeah, I'd just like to thank you all for this opportunity and my friends and family for coming. And also, I look forward to serving the citizens of Saline with the utmost respect.
Very good. Officer Clark, why don't you come forward to the dais and shake our hands? We'll all congratulate you. Very good. Officer Clark, congratulations. Officer, Sergeant, Chief. What title are we referring to Mr. Terry as now?
The Godfather.
Well, Mr. Terry, thank you for joining us as well. All right, excellent. Appreciate your attendance this evening. We are going to transition now to our second presentation, which is 123 net fiber. I believe we are. And Mr. Schonk, will you be joining them for the presentation? Okay, all right, very good. Gentlemen and lady, why don't we wait until the screen is down? Sure. And then we'll allow you to begin your presentation. I will actually move out of the way. I think Councilmember Dillon will as well. Excellent. Please begin.
Good evening, everyone. I want to first thank you for allowing us to present our solution here today in front of the board. My name is Jeff Morshell. I handle government and education affairs over at 123net. John Eierman, he's the Director of Sales Engineering and Support. And then we have Sarah Steiger, sorry.
Account manager.
Account manager, who handles the City of Saline account today. So what we have here today is a presentation of who 123net is, the services that we provide, and then specific to the City of Saline. Introductions, we handled that part, and then we're going to go into who 123net is for those of you who do not know who we are and what we do. A quick recap of the solution that has been presented to the city so far today, and then some questions, a period for questions if you guys had any. So 123net is a internet service provider based out of Southfield, Michigan. We service Michigan customers only, where we provide data center services, network services such as internet and connectivity between locations, and voice services. We have 4 carrier-neutral data centers throughout the state of Michigan, soon to be 5, with over 100,000 square feet of space. Within the data center, there's 40 carriers and IP providers. The 9th largest internet exchange in America. Over 4,800 fiber route miles throughout the state, where we have over 2,500 lit buildings and 120 carrier connection sites. Our mission is building network to make Michigan communities and businesses the best connected on the planet. And we know that's a big statement, but that's who we are. We live in Michigan, we work in Michigan, and that's our goal, is to make Michigan the best connected, and the city of Saline falls in that. I'm going to let John take over here for a minute.
So we kind of break up our mission statement into multiple different segments. You can see here first is building network. What's interesting about 123net is, unlike many other providers, we do everything in-house. So we do our design, our permitting, our construction, they're all done by 123net employees. And so that's one of the things that makes us unique. Amongst that is the amount of fiber that we're putting in the ground is far surpassing many, many others. And as you can see up there, Jeff had mentioned, we put about 300 miles of fiber per year in the ground. We've actually we're looking right now to actually try and double that amount in next year. So it's quite a substantial amount of fiber if you think about it going throughout the state. And the number 2,500 on there is actually wrong now. It's actually 3,500 lit fiber buildings throughout the state. and some additional things that we want to add on to that as we go through this. But part of that is now adding on residential services, something that we didn't normally do in the past. So I want to talk a little bit about that as well. So there's a couple different things in here. Like I said, we break this into sections. We have Michigan communities. You can see here are some of the communities that we work with. Obviously, you guys are one of them. We have some others that are in the area. We continue to work with education as well as the cities, and even at the county level. One of the most recent county awards that we actually were recently awarded was the county of Allegan, where we're building 1,000 miles of fiber for the entire county. So a lot of great stuff in the communities, continuing to try to find ways to bridge the underserved and unserved communities throughout the state, and that's actually where the DCTP comes in there. And that's where we actually donate a circuit to provide internet to people who can't afford it in an area. So they actually work on, we train them, they train the people in the community, and they show them how to use it, because the digital divide isn't just getting access, it's knowing how to use it. So then we have businesses. Some of these actually are right here in your backyard. Matter of fact, the one right in the middle is. But some of the biggest companies in the world work with 123net, and we want to continue to bring that kind of service to as many people as we can. And as Jeff mentioned, the best connected on the planet. That's a really bold statement, and I'm going to show you as we go through this how we do that. It's not just a statement, it is a way in which we operate, and there's a lot of things that we do with our infrastructure to make that happen. So here's a screenshot of our infrastructure throughout the state. You can see here we continue to build on this, continue to grow. This map, I like to tell people, every time we create a map, by the time we create it and we publish it, it's already outdated. That's how much we put in the ground. So what's interesting, Jeff had mentioned that we have 4 data centers. We are a carrier-neutral provider. What does that mean? As many of you guys can see up there, these are a lot of providers that probably you've heard of. So 123net will allow any one of those providers to use our infrastructure, which means if you want to go to our data center and you want to use our service, you absolutely can. You can also use anybody else in the building, and every one of these people are not on the list, and we also don't care. Because how do you drive better connectivity and better service in Michigan? By providing competition. So this is how we're bringing other competitors into the market to try and do so. And Jeff had mentioned the 9th largest internet exchange in North America. What's interesting about this is we actually most recently, as of last Thursday, how many of you here probably watched the Thursday night football game on Amazon? All right, so most people don't realize this, but that traffic actually came likely out of Southfield, out of our internet exchange. And because of that, it actually, in adjacent to everything else that we do, and we do exchange that traffic, we actually hit 1 terabyte per second of free traffic. If you put that into, try to wrap your head around that, think about, people who have internet connections at home, and think about how many people it would take to get to that level. It's a lot of bandwidth, and, we continue to bring all these providers, all these people together to exchange the traffic, and we do it free. We don't charge people to exchange traffic. Yet again, another way that we're bringing more bandwidth and better connectivity to the state. In addition to that, every single person that uses our service gets to share in the benefit of all this connectivity that we bring, because they now get direct access to all these people. So if you do watch Amazon, for example, the next game, know that it's probably coming out of 123net. So here's an example of kind of a lot of the things that we do when we build all this stuff and we put it together. So what is this, if we take the internet providers, we take the cloud providers, we take the internet exchange, which by the way, after it hit 1 terabyte per second, is now the world's largest fee-free in the world. Like, it's not in the state or in North America, it's in the world. So we are the largest fee-free internet exchange, which is something to be proud of, here in our state. But anyway, you blend all these things together. You take a lot of this connectivity and all these things that you can do, and you can start to weave all these pieces. And you can find ways in which you could just not just use internet connectivity, you can also bridge all these other pieces and get better connectivity from many other places. So I'm gonna pass it back to Jeff here.
So, in addition, as we said previously, in addition to the internet and the data center services and the internet exchange, one of the products that we provide is dark fiber infrastructure between locations. So today, the city of Saline has five city buildings essentially that are gonna be on this network between the city hall, the water plant, wastewater treatment plant, Public Works, and the rec center. What this dark fiber infrastructure allows is for unlimited traffic to be shared between sites. It's infrastructure that will not be obsolete within any of our lifetimes here today, right? It's something that will be in the ground and useful to the city of Saline for the next 20 or 30 years, okay? What you see here is kind of a breakdown of how it's set up. We have a connection between City Hall and the water plant, a connection between City Hall and the wastewater treatment plant, the Public Works building in City Hall and the rec center, and then a special separate connection between wastewater treatment plant and the water plant. Overall, the cost for this service over a 10-year period is $3,700.50 per month. The cost for that over the 10-year period is $450,000 for the entirety of the term. Once that first 10-year period is over, renewal options would be available. As you can see here, this is a snippet of what the map looks like with the new fiber infrastructure we'd be building to the city buildings in connecting with the existing fiber that's blue that's in the city today. To get a better understanding of what your network would look like, this shows the 5 buildings for the city of Saline and the network that you guys would be that would be dedicated for your operation. And John, I want to get back to John here to talk some about how this affects the residential services in the area here.
You know, so as I had mentioned, one of the things we are now doing is residential, and is kind of a continuation of our mission statement. So what we actually are doing as part of this is, you can see here on the screen, there are 2 segments of residential neighborhoods that are highlighted in red. This is completely unrelated to your project. We're doing this regardless. So you can see here, we're gonna be doing roughly 728 new homes in a pilot program right here in the city. So we are gonna continue to expand that, but there's in 2 phases. You know, you can see there's 398 and then the 330. And the idea is to eventually try and find a way to serve the entire city. I wanna mention here that how do you become the best connected? How do you provide service in which you can continue to make people enjoy the internet for their entirety of being a provider? And so what 123net is doing is actually bringing in service at a base level of 250 meg by 250 meg with speeds up to 6 gig by 6 gig with no contract, and with the highest price point, I think it's at like $159 per month. The lowest, I think, is at $59 or $69, something like that. So we're trying to give people basically the last internet connection they would ever need. They would never need to switch at that point, because I don't know when you guys, but I can't use that amount of bandwidth if I tried. But in relation to this project, we're actually going to be passing 60 residential parcels that would be in addition to the existing ones that we're going to do as a pilot program. So if you add it all up, there was 728 plus an additional 60 if we do the whole project to cover. Another thing that we like to note is every time that we add fiber to a home, it adds roughly $5,000 to a home's value. So it's a pretty nice addition for a lot of people. Any questions?
Very good. I don't believe, first of all, I don't think we're going to be using the screen anymore this evening, so yeah, it can go. Thank you, gentlemen. Mr. Schwank, anything you'd like to add before we open it up for questions? I don't think so. Any other questions for our guests? Mr. CEO, if you'd like to begin?
Thank you. Gentlemen, when you talk about a dark fiber network, to me, dark fiber means it's not utilized.
You got it.
So you'd put the network in and it would just sit there unutilized?
Yeah, so when we put the network in, it is indeed unutilized. It seems kind of counterintuitive, but the utilization actually comes from you. So when you put your equipment on it, it becomes lit, it then becomes utilized. But to us, it's dark because we're not having any equipment on it.
Okay, is there an additional charge beyond the $750 per site per month once it becomes utilized?
No.
Okay, and I'm sorry, you mentioned, when you were talking about the residential homes in these two pilot districts.
Yep.
You mentioned something at the tail end of that about a cost of $159 a month?
Yeah.
What was that?
That's just if somebody wants to get internet service from us at the highest level, I think it's 6 gig by 6 gig, it's $159 a month.
I see. But is there a level where it's free?
No, the free service would only be, or close to a free service would be at our lowest level, and then they would have to be part of the ACP. You know, that's the connectivity program, which people who can't afford internet or services like that would use. And that would be, I think it's a $30 discount off of the lowest, which I think is $59. So they'd be paying $29.
Okay, thank you. Several years ago, when I was still active with Washington County government, there was talk about a national network provided for emergency services. Are you familiar with that, or where that project is, or if it's coming to fruition at all?
I am not familiar with it, and I have not heard from anybody that is working on a project like that.
Okay, all right. It sounded pretty pie in the sky, even 5 years ago when they were talking about it. So you put in the network, we pay $750 a month. Do we, as a city, incur more cost than that once we start to utilize it?
No. You guys can continue to upgrade everything on your side, continue to get more speed over time, and the price never changes
Okay, for the 10-year period,
for the 10-year period.
all right.
And then after that point, there'd be, if there was a renewal period, we'd be looking at just maintenance on it, on the service. It would be less than what that number looks like today.
Okay, so you put the service in the ground. Is there any kind of concrete barrier or anything to help keep some of our local ambitious contractors from digging it up?
So there's nothing I can do to eventually, you know, if somebody were to dig something up, right? I mean, I'm not in control of people outside there digging, but we do have, obviously, we bury everything that we do.
Right.
And we do our own mistigs, so we would come out, we would mark it. But if somebody strikes it, we do have our own in-house people. We would come out and fix it right on the spot.
So is it in conduit or what?
It is conduit, yep.
Is there a concrete barrier poured over the top of that conduit?
No.
Okay, all right. I know some people have been doing that, at least in the past they were.
It would make it really hard for us to do maintenance if something were to happen.
That makes sense. Okay, no, that's all I have, Your Honor.
Very good. Thank you, Mr. Seal. Mr. Gearbaugh and then Mr. Delorco.
And I've talked to Mr. Schonk about this too, but we now currently have, what, I believe, five connection points or whatever. One is at the museum, or one are at each one of our museums. So then we would be able to use the other 3, and you're saying that the amount of traffic and everything goes through that would not have any fee or anything to it. So if we wanted to open it up for public Wi-Fi use or something of that nature, that wouldn't be a concern.
Are you referring to the fixed wireless service that you
Yes.
guys use today? Yeah, this is separate from that. This is more infrastructure, you know, in the ground that connects the 5 buildings that we showed up there. I'm not really sure how the connectivity works through the fixed wireless, but we can have another conversation about that.
Yeah, 5 points, and then there's
Yeah.
2 that they were eliminating.
There's 3 that are in use, and then I know that it was up to 5, so if you guys wanted to utilize 2 more buildings for extra Wi-Fi in any type of period, it would be under the same contract. But that's separate from what we're talking
Yeah,
about
that
today.
makes more sense. So if someone wanted to tap into this fiber, the fact that it's put in, would we allow that, or how would that be? Say another building downtown or something, or another
Yeah.
development comes in?
Yeah, so what the services, we have that blue line represented the services that were in place today. So businesses that are along that route can tap into that at any time that they wanted to. But anything that's new, there'll be dedicated fibers that are dedicated for the city alone. But there'll be others that are available to other businesses that might be nearby the new build as well. So yeah, anybody can use it, but the services that you guys would have would be dedicated for the city. Then no one else would be able to touch those essentially.
Because the dedicated line between the wastewater treatment plant and the water treatment plant, I know was one of our concerns for risk.
Right.
It not being able to be accessed by anyone else, so.
Yeah, 100%.
Okay. And then, the pilot program. We, in this town, we don't have any competition. We have either Frontier, which is basically DSL, and we have Comcast. What do you anticipate in your pilot program, and how soon would that be rolled out?
We've already started to do the design. You've actually probably should have seen some of our trucks going through. You should start seeing permitting soon, which means that we'll be starting construction relatively soon. I think our goal is to have the project started by March, at least the phase 1.
And how do you coordinate that construction? We ran into a problem with MDOT earlier this spring, which damaged significantly property of the city and so forth, and wanted to make sure how this is handled. How do you coordinate with the city?
Yeah, that's a great question. So everything we do, like I said, we do our own design and permitting. So we actually go out, we draw everything up, and then we submit plans to the city for permitting. The city then determines and lets us know if it's acceptable or not and issues the permit for construction, right? In some cases, we will attach to existing poles. I believe it's consumers down here, right? Or is it DTE?
DTE.
Okay, so we would attach to maybe an existing DTE pole. If it's in an MDOT right away, we would work with MDOT. And anybody else, we would try to have them call and do MISTIG markings to identify what's in the ground already before we start doing anything.
And in addition to what you were saying too, if there was any need for restoration or anything like if we had to dig something up or something was, like we had to break a sidewalk or something like that to do something, not to say that we would have to do that, but whatever we have to dig through, we would restore that after the fact.
Yeah, we do restoration as well.
For us, it's having the heads up. That was a problem that we had with MDOT. So. And then lastly, I noticed I didn't see, but does Frontier run anything through your?
They're the only ones who don't.
That's what okay. Thank you. That's all for me.
Thank you, Mayor Pro Tem Girba. Councilmember Delarco still have some questions?
Yeah, briefly. Most of my questions were answered, but I just want to make sure I understand. So essentially what we're accomplishing here is a private network dedicated to the city of Saline with the end game of stabilizing our existing bandwidth, which would essentially free us from using a public service like Xfinity Comcast, and we would have the ability to maintain complete control over this. I'm going to call it intranet instead of internet. Is that
Sure.
efficient?
I
Okay.
love that. It's a great term.
Okay. So that's certainly helpful. The main question I had is, with the fees, you presented them as a monthly recurring cost. So am I to assume that once we sign on with this, that the cost of installation is built into the monthly recurring cost?
Correct.
Okay. That's really all I needed to know. Thank you.
Very good. Thank you, Mr. Delarco. Councilmember Dillon?
Thank you. I just have a couple questions. So is your infrastructure that you're putting in, is it like a manual dig, or is it a boring situation?
Each situation's a little bit different, right? So most of them are going to be bored.
Okay.
However, if there are certain situations where they have to be hand dug for whatever reason, that would be the case as well. But most of it is bored.
Okay. And do you have, besides what's blue here, do you have current other infrastructure in the city at this point?
We do, yes.
Okay. And I guess my question would be probably for Mr. Schank about it, which is the condition in which it's in. I know at one point the city sort of made sort of a pledge to the community that moving forward, we were not going to let people start digging in our community if they don't maintain the current infrastructure they have. So I guess I'd like to make sure that piece of it is all set before we go ahead and say yes, because, and it's no reflection upon you, but we have various pieces of hanging wires, we have utility boxes that have been mowed over, lots of things like that that we've talked about, having those restored. So I'd like to make sure that that's an element of this.
Absolutely.
So the other piece that I have for you, Mr. Shunk, is what is the price difference between this fee and what we're currently paying monthly?
So it's in the memo, I believe, the
And
first page.
so-
I don't have it in front of me right now. I think
No,
it's
that's
800 and something a month. But the bigger issue is the current bandwidth is not enough for existing buildings. So we're only gaining, more and more need for a faster connection. And really, this would solve the stability issues we're having at all the sites. So,
Okay.
yeah,
I mean, it's a significant increase.
correct.
So, I mean, is there not an opportunity to increase our bandwidth with our current carrier? Is that what it is? Or are you just looking to privatize? Or
Yeah,
is
so
the-
there's a couple things there. The privatization adds a security layer, which is great, especially in this day and age. As far as the bandwidth concerns go, so the current Comcast business accounts are on a coax connection, which is just, we've tapped out the limit. We're at the top of that technology tier. So we could look at doing a Comcast fiber product, but the price is going to be pretty comparable to this, and there's also no fixed pricing on it. So they won't offer a long-term contract similar to what 123net will do.
Okay. And then my next question is probably for the city manager, which is funding source for this, to make up for this. This is a large difference on a monthly and, yearly basis.
Sure. So, one, we wanted today's conversation just to be about introducing you all to the concept, getting your input and feedback, and taking that back to finalize an actual ask. In the event that we do want to move forward with this project, we're talking, I think, about a $35,000 per year difference. I believe that Treasurer Cole, at a later item on this agenda, has identified some opportunities to improve our investment revenue streams that would more than make up for that difference. And it is a great trade-off for what we're trying to accomplish here, which is really to improve our internal productivity. Right now, we have instances where, because we're tapping out that bandwidth, I've literally watched staff struggle to even open documentations or applications that we're trying to access. So, and days when we go dark for hours on end because we just don't have the capacity built in. So I view this as an operational must for us if we want to continue to achieve peak efficiency for our organization.
I appreciate you saying that because I have been here where there's a definite lag.
Yeah.
And we lose people even internally on calls. So I appreciate that. So what is the time frame for this?
I think that'd probably be more for.
Yeah, so typically, in a situation where we already have fiber available in the area to build off of, we're looking at like a 120-day to 150-day, so like a 4 to 5 month period of construction. Now, that can be cut down significantly during the design and the permitting phase, where you guys would have control over the whole permitting process. Because what happens in the permitting process is we submit plans, and the folks that get our plans have up to 45 days to get back to us to say yes or no to approval. Now, if they wait 45 days to reject it, then we submit a new set of plans. Takes 45 more days. So really, as long as we're kind of all on the same page to try to get the best, the design phase through, that works best for us, works best for you, that time frame could be cut down significantly, especially since the permitting phase of the residential pilot programs is already in process. That is already happening with or without this project. So I feel like working together that relationship will already be pre-established before you guys make a decision on this one, if that makes sense. So, but, it's not going to be a 30-day turnaround, but there's still going to be, it doesn't need to be 5 months, I guess is my point.
Fantastic. I appreciate that. And I'll stop there.
Very good. Let me jump to Mr. Kamara Sulek, Mr. Seal, and then I'll come back to you in the event that Ms. Kraus does not have any questions or comments.
Yes, thank you for all the information. I understand a little bit more, and I'm a little more confused, but will this, I know you, in your presentation, that you estimate that this adds $5,000 in value, per home, but will that enhance the desirability of Saline? Has Has there been data for other municipalities where the residential connectivity has been a big draw? Because to me, it sounds, especially right now and all the security concerns and bandwidth, that this is something that people would want, especially working from home.
You're absolutely right. So, yes, there has been studies on this, and, if you think about it, we are not just competing locally or regionally, we're also competing internationally for business as well, right? So, having access to this kind of infrastructure also makes it favorable for business, right? So bringing even larger business and other businesses to the area is absolutely something that you can lean on, because not every city or township or even village has this kind of, connectivity. So it's not just an improvement in value, it's an improvement in lifestyle, and it does drive both business and people to move in. And we can share those studies if you'd like.
Okay. That answers my question, but is there any way to accelerate your program into Saline for residents? I mean, you're just going to be a little bit north of us.
I'm sure we can. We just have to, so what we do with the pilot programs is that's exactly what they are. They're pilots. We want to find out what the city's appetite is for a service like 123net. And if it's successful, then absolutely we would accelerate it. But
Okay.
you can always submit an address online if you'd like, and might be able to add it in there.
Okay, awesome. To back up with the time frame, it's not quite clear to me. Is there a range that you can give, like best case scenario, since you already have some infrastructure here?
3 to 5 months.
For the city
Best
buildings,
case
not for
scenario-
residential.
Best case scenario is probably 120 days.
20 days?
Yep.
Okay. And that'll provide a significant safety from those with malintent for hijacking municipal systems.
And if we weren't clear, what you guys are going from is 5 locations on separate internet connections today to 5 locations operating literally as one organization with one internet connection shared across the 5. So it's a much safer, much more, efficient way of doing business. Yeah, on cap, yeah.
Correct, yeah, so that's the advantage of the dark fiber. So, like they said, over the 10-year period, basically, if we upgrade each end, we can upgrade the speed over time as needed. So it's not like we're hitting a cap. The cap is on us as the city to see how fast we want to go. So they provide the lanes, basically, and then we set the speed limit, so.
Okay.
That
Good
makes
analogy.
sense, yeah.
We should get a discount on our cybersecurity insurance.
Well, I see this as, crucial for the effective and efficient work for, for our city staff and those buildings, the safety and security. So I like what you're selling. That's all I have.
Very good, thank you. Councilmember Kraus, any questions or comments?
No.
Mr. Seal, back to you.
Yes, thank you. When did 123net come into existence?
1995.
And was did you purchase other businesses to come into existence?
Nope, we started off as basically a company that did ISDN offloading, which is, if you guys all remember, the dial-up days, the old AOLs. That's actually what we founded here in Michigan. Our CEO, our CTO, been with the organization since it started, and they're still here today. So we did not acquire anybody. We very rarely do any mergers or acquisitions.
Okay.
And very, very rarely.
If I understand what's being said, this price that you quote for the 10-year period has no upper limit in terms of bandwidth?
Correct.
So
It's
if
based
we need
on-
to increase, that's
Have
on
at
you.
it.
Okay.
I would like to see you tap it out if you could try.
There isn't equipment that's been invented yet that could tap it out, essentially.
Lawrence Tech is on it.
Let me say this to try and wrap this up. Of course, this item, as indicated on the agenda this evening, will return as an action item at our subsequent meeting. So in the interim, if folks do have questions a financial nature, certainly direct those to the city manager or to the city treasurer. If they're more technical, please direct those to our IT administrator, Mr. Schonk. I think this makes sense. I think this is good for the city. I'm particularly intrigued by the pilot program, which you don't have the map on the screen anymore, but I believe that benefits Colony Estates, Northview, and boy, that looks like the and the entirety of Rolling Meadows, yeah, which is marvelous. This may be more of a comment than a question, but as you were presenting the slideshow, our Channel 18 administrator reminded me that we have internet issues in the core of our community, specifically our downtown. And in my judgment, would really benefit from public Wi-Fi. Maybe this is a question more for our IT administrator. Any discussion about beefing up connectivity in our downtown?
Yeah, we've had those conversations, and this would definitely, the path, it's a couple slides back, but is not far from downtown, so I think that's something we could explore as well with this project.
Very good. All right, will our guests return in 2 weeks, or will you be taking the lead on this at that time, Mr. Schonk?
I think unless there's any further questions, I would assume,
Okay.
Angela, yeah.
Very good. One last opportunity for questions, if there are any. Ms. Dillon?
Thank you. One of the things that we've talked about in the past is internet access in our parks so that we could have cameras and such. Is there any opportunity to sort of go off the path here and put some links at least into some of our bigger parks along the way?
I think, yeah, we could explore that further with 123net and see what kind of makes sense. I think there's some other technologies we could probably utilize that would be more fitting for that kind of need, but that's definitely something they could help us with in the future.
One last question, Mr. Seal.
The fiber that you indicate in blue, mostly in the downtown area or in the core of, yes. Who owns that now?
We do.
You do? Okay, very good, thank you.
All right. We appreciate your time. Thank you very much. Excellent presentation. We look forward to revisiting this issue in 2 weeks.
Great.
Thank you. Have a great night.
Happy Thanksgiving.
Same to you. We proceed now to the consent agenda. The following consent agenda will normally be adopted without discussion. However, at the request of any citizen or council member, any item may be removed from the consent agenda for council discussion.
Moved as distributed,
How about as submitted, Mr. Seal?
as submitted.
Thank you. Is there a second?
Second.
Seconded by Kamara Sulak. Hearing no discussion or comment, all those in favor of approving as submitted signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, say nay. Ayes have it, and the motion carries unanimously. We come now to public hearings. Agenda item 22-265, special land use for adult use medical marijuana retailer at 660 East Michigan Ave. The first motion will be a motion to open the public hearing, affording the public an opportunity to speak to this issue at, oh my goodness, let's say 7:43.
Move to open public hearing.
Moved by Gearbaugh, that was second by CO.
Yes, sir.
Thank you. All those in favor of opening the public hearing, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, say nay. Ayes have it. Public hearing is now open. Is there anyone who wishes to speak to this issue?
Move to close.
Moved by CO to close, and then seconded by Mayor Pro Tem Gearbaugh. All those in favor of approving, or all those in favor of closing the public hearing, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, say nay. Ayes have it. Public hearing is now closed. The third motion is a motion to acknowledge the memo dated October the 13th, 2022 from Recording Secretary Ritchie and to approve with conditions or not to approve the special land use for 660 East Michigan Avenue for adult use marijuana retailer.
Move to acknowledge.
Second.
Moved by Kraus to acknowledge, and seconded by Gearbaugh. Mr. Harrington, in Recording Secretary Ritchie's absence, would you care to comment on this issue?
Yes, absolutely. This item came before council for a medical marijuana provisioning center on August 15th, which you all approved. That was also approved by the Planning Commission. The adult use for this site was also recommended unanimously by the Planning Commission at their October 12th meeting. They submitted the same site plan for both of them. The conditions remain the same. We believe as a staff that they meet the special land use criteria. And it's Zach's is the current location if you're unfamiliar. So Zach's Car Wash on East Michigan Avenue.
Very good. Questions for our Community Development Director? Ms. Dillon?
Just one question. It always says in the conditions that it's subject to MDOT's, information and comment. Like, what is the time frame for that? And who do those comments go to? Do they just go to the applicant?
Well, if MDOT had any issue with something, I would assure you that they would notify us immediately if they had a problem with something that the city was doing, either by just showing up and letting us know, To be honest with you, I'm still not totally sure on how that MDOT approval process goes with the curb cuts for US 12, but MDOT does have to review them. And I have a hard time imagining that they could cut on the road without MDOT finding out. So it's, I don't have the best answer for you on that at the moment, but like I said, I assure you that MDOT is vigilant about the curb cuts being made.
I was just trying to figure out, because when you go through the conditions, that's like always the first one, and it says, you know, that they're subject to that. But then as you follow down the list, then there's concerns about the city engineer and moving
Right.
the driveway, and so.
So that's because the conditions are also attached to a preliminary site plan. None of our marijuana applicants proposed or even tried to attempt, none of our applicants tried to go through a combined site plan process, which would have lumped their final in. So by the time that you've seen all of these, they're still only in a preliminary phase, and there still are those deeper engineering reviews, which are part of the final site plan process rather than the preliminary, which is much more conceptual. So it's more of, does the city believe that this, generally speaking, meets our intent for aesthetics, zoning, spacing, setbacks, et cetera, green space? That's the preliminary focus, and then the final site plan is more, what are you actually building? What is the exact dimension of it? What is the floor plan? What are the elevations? What are utilities are you tapping? How are you tapping them? Does MDOT see them? So that's part of the disconnect between what you're seeing and then what the Planning Commission will see at their final site plan.
The other thing that I'm struggling with through this entire process is parking. Because the number of parking spaces, I know we have a certain threshold, and then some are going beyond that on their own accord. And so I appreciate that. Are they just utilizing the footprint they have? Do they anticipate more traffic? Is that what it is?
So I'll add a couple comments here. So parking is obviously a contentious issue in every community. Some communities have abandoned minimum parking requirements. We are not one of them, nor will we ever be, likely given our stature as more of a suburban or rural community. I will say, though, that our parking requirement for retail spaces, which is 1 per 100 square feet, is astronomically higher than most communities. Like the minimum that the APA, American Planners Association, usually would recommend is about a 1 per 250. So we're already, over twice as over, we would consider a very overparked community by most professional standards of parking. So parking, if they're meeting the requirements, it's not really a concern of mine. Some applicants have chosen to go above and beyond in anticipation of a following or a large business, or maybe they just plan on having more employees for security measures or just for processing and efficiency measures. So that's part of the discrepancy. Different businesses operate in different ways when it comes to the employees on site. So if you see a proposal with a lot extra parking, it probably has something to do with their general operations versus one that just meets that parking requirement is more than likely to succeed. So not a concern of mine.
Okay, because in this one, I mean, they have a large lobby waiting area. I think that has like 12 chairs to it. They've got, I think it's 8 POS stations. So they look like they're a very active, they plan to have a very active facility. And I guess my ask is there a limit of, do dispensaries generally limit the number of people inside, so where you would have a stacked cars outside waiting to get in?
Just from walking and driving by them in Ann Arbor, that has not been something I've ever witnessed of stacking. Usually it seems like there are almost no cars in the parking lots. And granted, Ann Arbor is a far more walkable and has a lot more pedestrians in their community. So it's probably not a one-for-one comparison, but I really doubt that we'd see any stacking or issues like that with any of these, especially given the volume of the number that we've had. Now, part of the site plan and the SLU process is, well, if there's some area where you're no longer complying with the ordinance or you are becoming a nuisance due to overflow parking, we as the city have a right to always go back and say, hey, we need to review this. I mean, that's the benefit of the special land use, that's the benefit of the site plan, and a real strength that we have as a city is to be able to go back and correct action if needed.
And will they be allowed to keep their marquee sign at the street, the one that the car wash already has?
It would depend. I would have to check the exact specs of the sign to see if it's non-conforming. Likely, in all likelihood, similar to the Mickey's sign that was asked to be removed at the last Planning Commission meeting. You'll have some leeway with that, and the Planning Commission would have definite leeway with that on the final site plan review.
Okay. Thank you very much.
Mr. Gearbaugh, questions?
And I forgot to ask this. We had the similar issue with, what do we call it? Car service, where you drive up and be able to, we didn't put that as a special condition in this, did we? or recommend that from the,
I think we've only put it on the ones that have explicitly asked for it. Because our ordinance is rather vague right now, I don't think they necessarily even have the right to do it with or without explicit permission. So it's only the ones that have explicitly asked or noted on their site plan that they intend to do curbside service that we've added as a condition that, no, you can't do this until the city adopts a formal ordinance.
okay. I guess I would think that that would be something I'd want to add to this, just to be consistent with all of our permits that we're granting, or special land use we're granting. The only other question on this one, when you mentioned stacking, I think the only issue was if we'd had drive-through, and we're not allowing drive-through, so that's generally where we'd have the problem. Like Mickey's, or like Tim Hortons.
Oh, yeah, that's stacking, for sure.
That's stacking. Bad stacking.
Any additional questions for Mr. Harrington? Okay, we have a motion moved, I believe it was by Kraus, seconded by Gearbaugh, to simply acknowledge receipt of the memo dated October the 13th. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, say nay. Ayes have it, the motion carries unanimously. Is there a motion now to approve with conditions, not to approve, or to modify the list of conditions as presented? And I believe there are 7.
I'll move to approve with conditions, including the addition, curbside pickup not be allowed until such ordinance
Is written or adopted by this.
by council.
Okay. Got that, Clerk Royal? Okay, so that'll be condition 8, Mr. Gearbaugh?
Correct.
Okay, so it's been moved by Gearbaugh to approve with conditions, adding number 8 as just articulated. Is there a second to
I'll
that motion?
second that.
Seconded by Councilmember Kamara Sulek. Is there any discussion on the motion? There appears to be none. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, say nay. Ayes have it, the motion carries unanimously. We move on to new business item 22-264, special land use for adult use marijuana retailer at 813 West Michigan Ave. Again, the first motion would be a motion to open the public hearing at 7:51, affording the public to speak to this issue.
moved.
Moved by Gearbaugh to open the public hearing. Was that a second by CO?
Yes, sir.
Thank you. All those in favor of opening the public hearing, say aye.
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 Opposed, say nay. Ayes have it. Public hearing is now open. Is there anyone who wishes to speak to this issue?
Move to close.
I'll let Gearbaugh be the mover and CO again be the second to close the public hearing at the same time. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, say nay. Ayes have it, and the motion carries unanimously. We move on to the third motion, which is a motion to acknowledge the receipt of the memo dated October the 13th, 2022, from Recording Secretary Ritchie, and to approve with conditions or not to approve the special land use for 813 West Michigan Avenue for adult use marijuana retailer.
Move to acknowledge and approve with conditions to include the condition that Mr. Gearbaugh added to the previous motion among the conditions.
Exact same language that Mr. Gearbaugh had proposed for the previous motion, Mr. CO?
Yes, Your Honor.
Okay, so that would be condition 14. Is there a second to that motion?
Second.
Okay, so it's been moved by CO, seconded by Kamara Sulek, to approve with conditions all 13 that are enumerated, and then a 14th that mirrors the language Mr. Gearbaugh offered for the last substantive motion, which was to approve a special land use for a medical marijuana retailer on East Michigan Avenue. Again, in Recording Secretary Ritchie's absence, Mr. Harrington, would you care to comment on this issue?
Absolutely. This was one of the more contentious ones that went through Planning Commission, but we ultimately worked with the applicant to find solutions to some of the issues. So primarily, the first concern was parking, as no surprise. So the lot was, if you're unfamiliar, it's a building that is aligned north-south and is directly in front of 7 pre-manufactured industrial-ish buildings. They were originally owned, both parcels, by the same family, and in fact, the original site plan for 813 Michigan Avenue was dependent on the parking at 783 West Michigan Avenue. Upon this discovery, we worked with the applicant and the owners of the properties, who still belong to the same family but are different people at this point in time, to come up with a shared parking agreement, shared ingress-egress agreement, to cement the parking there. So not only does it benefit all the tenants currently there, but all future tenants on both parcels. And it should really amplify the number of parking spaces. Obviously, that lot to the south has a lot more parking room than the building at 813, which runs north-south. So with that, and then with some of these other conditions that we've added, staff has no concerns and recommends approval of this special land use.
Very good. I believe the applicant petitioner is here, am I correct? Correct. Would you gentlemen care to make a comment at this time? Not required, but if you'd like to, I'd be happy to afford you that privilege.
Yeah, briefly, sure. Good evening, Mayor Pro Tem, members of the City Council. My name is Stephen Esty. I'm counsel for the applicant. Compassionate Advisors LLC. I also have with me tonight Martin Stoneman, as well as the landlord for the property at issue at 813 West Michigan Avenue. The only thing I would note is that Compassionate Advisors LLC, for your benefit, is doing business as Pinkana, which is one of the premier cannabis companies in the state. They have 3 other facilities in Calcassa, East Lansing, and Kalamazoo. They're vertically integrated, so they produce, they provision, and transport. As the planner has noted, I think we are amenable to all the conditions. We were pleased to get the Planning Commission's approval, and we would hope that this City Council would approve as well. We're here to answer any questions that you have tonight.
Very good. Well, why don't you hang tight in the event there are questions that are best addressed by you or your colleague. I'll open up for questions at this time for either the petitioner or for city staff. Councilmember Dillon.
Thank you. First, I just want to start with the housekeeping. Did we have to do medical first, then adult use? Because medical's got, it's in the order of the document numbers, it's first, but on the agenda, they come up differently.
Yeah, so part of the reason for that is that we held the public hearing at the last meeting and then recommend postponement because the applicant was unable to attend and would have preferred to be here. So since that public hearing was already held, it actually falls under old business from my understanding. But if something is procedurally incorrect, please let me know.
No, that's correct. Because it's postponed from the last meeting, it's actually later in the agenda.
Okay, I just wanted to.
And then just to clarify, on our ordinance, we're rather indifferent between if you applied for medical first or adult use. And in fact, you're not required to apply for one or the other, or for both. You could apply for one or the other. We only have one applicant that did not choose to pursue a medical provisioning center. But essentially, anyone could have done it in any order or without one or the other.
Okay. It's just in the past, all the other ones have come through medical first. That's fine. My question on this one just sort of stems around parking and kind of understanding what's being done. And I've read through the numbers and trying to figure this out. So when I look at the plot of land, where exactly is the overflow parking going to fall? If I'm looking at, it's going to fall down in here?
That is correct. Those 7, so that's 813 West Michigan Avenue is the common address.
Right,
for
this
all
is the property. So
So
now.
that's 783, I apologize, is that southern portion. It's technically a separate parcel, but as I mentioned, because of ingress and egress, actually, and the landlord may be able to speak to this too, without the parking agreement and without that shared egress agreement, it's impossible to actually access that southern lot. Because, like I said, it was originally designed to be in conjunction with one another. Although they are technically separate parcels, they are dependent on one another.
So that's that's a piece to it, because there is an exit onto River Oaks Boulevard. Is that the entrance for those back properties for the 783?
I think it's more of an alleyway, but it was not, it was meant to be an exit or an exterior way for traffic to flow, but it was not a primary entrance or exit as it was designed in the 70s, nor is it now. In addition, I'll add that one of the special land use conditions, despite the fact that it would devalue the property entirely to remove the ingress-egress agreement, is that in the event that the ingress-egress agreement / parking agreement is voided or otherwise removed, that the Planning Commission would immediately instigate a re-review of the entire process here.
Okay. So when you start utilizing parking spots from the 783 section, how does that impact the businesses that are there?
Yeah, so if you take a look at the memo I wrote on 10-6, and I think the CWA memo as well, I did a couple different ways that you can, or it was for Wags and Whiskers, because that's at that southern lot.
Right.
Primarily, so originally when it was designed, it was meant to be a shopping center. It was going to be primarily retail, but over time, they've actually had a variety of use variances as well as other folks that are primarily contractors actually use that lot. So it's a very underutilized lot as it is now. And between the set of tenants, they actually do meet, or they come close to meeting that 1 per 100. But if you were to dice it up by uses, by saying, hey, that these are their contractors' uses, our parking code says that you need this many spaces per square footage, they're actually well over the requirement. But it depends on how you slice it and how you want to look at it.
Okay. Because what I'm trying to look at now is this agreement that is being established. I'm not sure what page it is. to utilize those back spots goes on in perpetuity. So if the purpose of the back buildings were to change, and say a grocery store wanted to take over that back section, then how would they get those parking spaces back?
Yeah, so that'd be a challenging process, and that's kind of how we wound up in this one in the first place, too, of, well, how did this site come to be if it's so underparked with just, if you just consider 813 West Michigan Avenue, it's underparked. So how do we have this non-conforming use like that's this non-conforming, especially because it was developed in the 70s. Our first zoning code was in 1968. So we would wind up in a similar position, and we would have to re-review the entirety of the site effectively is how that would work.
Okay. Because it just seems like we're taking a problem and just moving it backwards to another property.
I don't know if that's necessarily a fair characterization, because the parking on that site has been an issue, especially some of the public comments we received from the Planning Commission really surrounded the dance studio that's located in the final suite of 813, and confusion over where you park and how you can park. But I believe there's ample space between those 7 prefabricated industrial buildings at 783, as well as the spots at 813 to accommodate all those. Now, if there was a total wholesale change of use for those buildings, like for a grocery store, for example, I don't actually know how you would construct a building out of those 7 buildings to effectively accommodate that. But I don't think we have a reasonable belief at the moment that it would change so drastically that it would exacerbate the parking issue further.
Okay. And so then are you now closing the entrance exit on River Oaks from that parking? Is that going to go away?
No, that will stay.
That will stay. So it's just going to be awkward of how you get out if they're going to make use of those parking spots that right now are actually the drive-through to get out. I mean, I live on the west side of town. I see what that dance studio is like, and it's sort of sheer chaos at certain times with the way that works, and just sort of understanding. I just don't want children coming out thinking that this is either a parking lot, but there's still moving traffic coming through it, or what that aspect is going to look like.
Right, so there's a couple things that we'll be considering on the final site plan. So one of them is the parking on 813, on the site at 813 itself, especially on the eastern portion of it, so the part that abuts the gas station right next door to it. In addition, one of the conditions established here is to restripe the entire parking lot and provide proper wayfinding signage. In addition, having the employees of this establishment park on the southern lot to alleviate some of the parking tensions on the lot on 813 itself.
Okay. And the other piece to that is that the party store does get deliveries on a very regular basis, which take up numerous parking spots when they're coming in and out. And yes, it's short-term parking, but they do utilize several spots. And so kind of just understanding the in and the out. I mean, I assume this is going to be well-trafficked facility based on its brand and its reputation. So I think there's going to be a constant flow of people. There's a constant flow of people into the party store. There's a constant flow of people through the dance studio. So it's going to be a lot of cars. It's unlike some of the other properties that we've looked at. And so I really am struggling with the way that this is being configured, that I just don't think that we have ample parking at any given time. I know we've done numbers, but, I mean, those are snapshots, like, in theory. I mean, I've been there when the cars are just waiting to park at certain times because of the dance and, other things that are going on there. So I just want to make sure that it's all going to work in conjunction with each other. And right now, I'm not really sure that I just feel like we're taking pieces from pieces.
Go ahead.
Yeah, just a couple points if I could.
Sure.
And of course, if Ben has anything further to say. But first of all, there was a detailed parking study done by Fleiss and Vandervink. And that study indicated that the site with all the uses, the liquor store and the dance studio, is underparked. So there's already more parking at that site than is needed. Currently, there's nothing that indicates to people that they should park in the back. We're going to have a sign that's going to direct people to park in the back. And ultimately, this parking agreement is just an overflow. It's an added benefit in the event that there is additional parking. It shouldn't really be necessary from a straight parking standpoint, but the fact that we have it is an added benefit, I think, for both the southern parcel and this particular parcel at 813. I would also note that, all of the consultants that reviewed this issue, specifically Carlisle Wortman, your planner, Mr. Harrington, and Fleiss and Vandervink, all agreed that there was more than ample parking and that the parking shouldn't be an issue with this use there. So I think with all of that, there should be some assurances on the city council that the experts have looked at this, the independent experts have looked at it, staff has looked at it, and everybody has concluded that this is perfectly acceptable how it's going to be parked, and in fact, over-parked pretty significantly.
Additional questions from the dais? I guess we have a bunch. Let me go, Kamara Sulak, CEO, and then I'll jump down to Mayor Pro Tem Gearbox.
Okay, so this question is for Mr. Harrington. So essentially, with those industrial buildings to the south and the underutilized parking, people could park anywhere. Somebody from the liquor store could park down and nobody would really know it, except with the restriping and the wayfinding signs, it'll be more apparent of where the parking is for the center unit.
Yeah, that is correct. But the restriping is not just for the benefit of the center unit, although the applicant has offered to restripe the entirety, from my understanding, the entirety of both the lots. I don't believe they're signing that specifically for their business. It could, general parking for the tenant centers.
That's correct.
Okay, yeah. And then help me understand, so the shared parking agreement, is that in perpetuity?
Yes, it's recorded with the county. It's an official recording easement. And that was a condition of this as well, that it be officially recorded with the county before final site plan review.
So it's met all rules
Yes.
and regulations?
Okay.
That's all I got. Thank you.
Mr. Seal?
Yes. Because it was just now added at tonight's meeting, are you, sir, and your client aware of what this 14th condition is that we're asking be added?
I heard it briefly in the first motion, but then it wasn't repeated verbatim in
Be
the
happy to
second
have
one.
the
So
clerk restate it for the record, for your benefit.
It's for curbside pickup is not allowed until adopted by council.
yeah, I don't think you have any issue with that. No, that's perfectly acceptable.
Okay, just wanted to make sure that you understood.
No, I appreciate it.
That's all.
That's all, Mr. Seal? Very good. Mayor Pro Tem Gearbox, questions, comments?
For Mr. Harrington, can you clarify again the egress, I guess, or whatever, onto River Oaks? Both of those properties have a right-of-way into that, off of that driveway onto?
Right, that's where it gets a little hazy here with how it was developed in the 70s, and why it was done in the way that it was done is beyond me. But nevertheless, yes, so I think 813 has the actual egress on River Oaks, the northernmost one, not the alley behind the buildings, which is why 783 is dependent on 813, because they have both entrances and exits besides one alleyway that would not meet our typical access standards for a primary entrance and exit, from my understanding. And then the southern entrance behind the 7 buildings, I believe, is primarily meant for deliveries or other access, but I wasn't here in the 70s to tell you what the primary purpose of that is, but I would guess it's for deliveries or other things.
I'm just saying, should that also be clarified so that makes it better for ingress and egress on that property?
I mean, we can. I don't necessarily know the benefit of it. I mean, because I don't think a lot of people swing behind those 7 buildings to try to access that second entrance, but it's something we could sign, or we ask the applicant to sign.
As I look at that, making sure that we have more traffic, I don't know whatever's going to happen at River Oaks Boulevard at some point, but should a stoplight or something go in there because of the additional traffic? I just didn't realize that when we were talking about it, was more the issue we've always talked about was just having additional parking, not necessarily that you couldn't get over to River Oaks. Could at some point 813 say, no, we don't want you to be able to exit?
No, because they're like I said, that the agreements are contingent on one another, from my understanding with how it's recorded. The access agreement is the same as the parking agreement as far as the county is concerned. And as I mentioned, if 783 said you can't park here, then 813 would say, well, then you can't exit besides the one exit on River Oaks. So, and like, as I mentioned, if that agreement were ever to be voided, ingress, egress, parking, whatever it might be, it would instigate an instant site plan review upon the planning commission's finding, which would allow potentially to remove any the special land use or other issues here, so.
Yeah.
No, I was just more worried about the River Oaks access, not so much the Michigan Avenue.
If I may, I would just note that the title of the document is ingress and egress easement and cross easement and reciprocal parking agreement. And the first thing it does provide is an ingress and egress easement over the drives.
Both drives?
Yeah, see, well, I think it's both drives. Is it both? Yeah, it's the whole site. So it's both an ingress and egress easement and a reciprocal parking easement. So you'll get the benefit of both of those once it's recorded, and I think that was the reason that Ben and the staff had recommended it.
No, appreciate that. We just hadn't discussed this at planning on that specific topic issue. The other we had, so thank you for clarifying.
Yeah, you're welcome. Yep.
And this is for staff to consider. I believe we should be having no parking on River Oaks Boulevard, and that to avoid any kind of stacking or inability to get emergency vehicles in and out of that road. I don't know what it currently is, but that may be something for our chief of police to review. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Gearbaugh. Any additional questions for staff or the applicant? Any subsequent discussion on the motion? We do have a motion on the floor moved by CO, seconded by Mayor Sulak to approve with conditions as enumerated, adding number 14. There's no discussion. All those in favor of the motion say aye. Aye. Opposed say nay. Ayes have it, the motion carries unanimously. We move on to unfinished business, item 22-257, special land use for medical marijuana provisioning center at 813 West Michigan Ave. This will be a motion to acknowledge receipt of the memo dated October the 4th, 2022, from Recording Secretary Ritchie, and to approve with conditions or not to approve the special land use at 465 East Michigan Ave for medical marijuana provisioning center, and the conditions are outlined, and there are 5 of them.
I'll move to acknowledge receipt.
Okay, moved by Gearbaugh to acknowledge receipt. Is there a second?
Second.
Seconded by Dillon. I'll get you on the next one, Mr. CO. Again, in Ms. Ritchie's absence, Mr. Harrington, would you comment on the memo dated October the 4th?
Absolutely. Very similar to our last case, because of the delays in the medical review, primarily surrounding parking, ended up getting bumped to being pretty close to each other, despite the fact that they were originally scheduled a few months apart. I don't have any further comments besides what we just discussed. It's the same case, just medical versus adult use.
Easy enough. Questions? Mayor Pro Tem Gearbaugh.
Just a question. We have 14 conditions on the other one, and we've only got 5 on this one. Why the discrepancies? Wouldn't they be the same for both?
They could be, yes. I think because we were doing the conditions slightly differently in July than we started doing now. We've now switched to how we add the conditions being more similar between the site plan and the SLU themselves. It's more of a semantics thing. I'm still kind of confused on the exact legally binding nature of only having it on the site plan versus the SLU, but you could effectively do both conditions, both sets of 14 on both plans, and it would be comparable.
Okay.
Real quick, the Clerk Royal just reminded me, or made me aware, rather, that the address on this motion is incorrect. It should be 813, not 465 East Michigan. Obviously, West Michigan, excuse me. It notes the correct address in the header, but Mr. Gearbaugh, I'm assuming that you're still amenable to, actually, no, you just acknowledged.
I just acknowledged.
Yep, we're not even there yet.
Not
Okay,
yet.
sorry about that.
No problem.
But please note that for any subsequent motions. I didn't mean to cut you off, Mayor Pro Tem Gearbaugh, if you had additional questions for staff or the
No,
applicant.
that was the question, and I think that's probably what, I just wanted to make sure, since we're being consistent about what we're doing, we might as well have the same conditions on both motions.
No, I agree. I think
That was just my question at this point.
Okay. Additional questions for Mr. Harrington? Councilmember Dillon?
So there is one thing, one of the conditions is that the proposed land use will not exasperate the parking nonconformity that exists on the site. So, I mean, it's a nonconformity, and how is it not making it worse by adding this type of a business that will need more parking?
Right, so as I mentioned, it really comes down to, well, how do we want to measure the parking? So it's a nonconformity in one sense if we call the whole thing a shopping center and base it off of 1 per 100 square footage, and then it changes after 10,000 square feet to about 1 per 250, I believe, and then after like 15,000 square feet, the calculation changes again. Versus if you actually delineate it by what's being used there now, which is primarily contractors' offices, the parking calculation does change quite drastically. So it really matters how we view it. In addition, I would say if the fear is what if the contractor's office becomes a retail store or something else, or if they all become retail stores, that would be the same problem you'd run into in any commercial district where contractors' offices are potentially an allowed use, in addition to a retail store being potentially an allowed use. So no matter where you go, you would see something like that. It really just comes down to, well, how do we want to measure the parking? What do we viably see going forward? And I would say these sites are not really prime for your run-of-the-mill retail, and over time have really aged into being more of a contractor's type office rather than a typical retail. So that's why I provided two different parking metrics and calculations for how we could come to this conclusion. Yes, so technically if we see it, you're under no obligation to define whether we're measuring it as a strip center or measuring it as individual uses, essentially either. So there's a couple different complexities here.
Right. Well, I mean, the other piece that I just want to kind of keep rolling into this is we keep talking, oh, it's contractors. Well, we have to remember that there was a daycare center in there. There's now a dog groomer in there. So, I mean, the use has changed. It isn't necessarily just contractor warehouse type space. So I don't know whether that will become a thing, and as one business moves in, another business will move in, and its use will change.
Yeah, I would add that the buildings, and maybe the landlord, or if the landlord is able to speak to it, the building furthest to the west has been where the daycare center is, which then turned into the dog groomers, and there's an alteration shop right next door to that that's been there for quite some time. The buildings further to the east have historically and recently remained only as contractors' offices, and I would guess that there's probably a reason for that based on the condition and age of those buildings and the space inside of them. So I think the buildings further west are probably more suited for more of those traditional retail uses versus the buildings further east are probably not going to become that without substantial modification to the buildings.
Okay. Thank you.
Would you care to comment at all?
If I may, I just wanted to add to that too, so the parking lot that was constructed in 1978, the part of that previous approval, I think Ben may have mentioned this either today here at the meeting or in his report, required at that time in 1978 that a shared parking agreement be recorded. Everybody's researched that, and that was never done. So this is actually remedying that issue that should have happened back then. And then again, there's no exacerbation in the sense that we're still parked less than what's allowed with all the uses on the site. So, I mean, it would only be an exacerbation if we exceeded those numbers, and all of the expert reports have demonstrated that we're below those numbers. So I don't think you should have any worry about that as we move forward in the future with this site.
Right. And then if I can reiterate a point I made earlier, our parking amount in the city is astronomically higher than anyone would recommend. I mean, a 1 per 100 is very high. Like, we're already an overparked community, so I don't know if that's although it is our code and it's my job to uphold our code, I don't know if it's necessarily the pallbearer metric of what, this is what we're going to be doing and this is the correct amount of parking to have, and something that I think would warrant further review that I'm happy to engage in. But holding up the 1 to 100 as like that is the correct amount of parking, I don't know is necessarily correct or logically consistent with what we know about parking now in 2022 versus when that was likely written 30 years ago.
Any additional questions for city staff or the applicant? There appear to be none. We do have a motion on the floor simply to acknowledge receipt of the memo. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, say nay. Ayes have it, the motion carries unanimously. What's your pleasure? To approve with conditions, to modify the conditions, or to not approve? And then please note the address changed. We are referring now to 813 West Michigan Ave, not 465 East Michigan Ave.
I'll move to approve with the same 14 conditions as the adult marijuana provision.
For the same property? Okay.
Correct, for 813 West Michigan.
Okay, is that a second?
I'll second, Your Honor, but I do have a question. Because we've already conducted the public hearing on this, can we now change the conditions?
Absolutely, because you haven't taken action. The public hearing is just an opportunity for the public to weigh in on the proposed action.
Okay.
So it's going to be a move by Mayor Pro Tem Gearbaugh, a second by Councilmember CO to approve with the same 14 conditions as were approved with the previous motion for adult use at 813 West Michigan Ave. Is that correct?
That's correct.
Correct, okay, very good. Is there any subsequent discussion or questions for staff or the applicant? Easy enough. Then all those in favor of the motion signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, say nay. Ayes have it, and the motion carries unanimously. Gentlemen, thank you. Have a good evening. Same to you. We move on now to unfinished business, item 22-297, resolution for holiday meetings. This will be a motion to acknowledge receipt of the memo from City Manager O'Toole and to adopt or not to adopt resolution 22-279.
Move to acknowledge and adopt.
Moved by Seal, or Kraus, excuse me, to acknowledge and to adopt, and seconded by Seal. Is that correct?
Correct.
Okay. City Manager O'Toole, do you care to make a brief comment?
So this is just in response to the changes that we recommended. It would be rescinding the existing resolution that named MLK Day and President's Day as holidays. We now list MLK Day as an official city holiday within our personnel policies, so that's covered. And it would add Juneteenth as a holiday in which we would no longer schedule city business.
Very good. Any questions for the City Manager? Ms. Dillon?
Juneteenth is not currently an observed city holiday.
Correct. It is a federal holiday, though.
Right. Thank you.
Any additional discussion or questions? No, then all those in favor of the motion to acknowledge and to adopt, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, say nay. Ayes have it, the motion carries unanimously. We move on to new business, item 22-285, Community Development Budget Amendment. This will be a motion to acknowledge receipt of the memo from Community Development Director Harrington and to authorize, not authorize the City Treasurer to amend line items. With all due respect, friends, I'm not reading that. It's enumerated. It's enumerated on the agenda. So is there a motion to acknowledge receipt and to authorize or not authorize?
Move to acknowledge.
Moved by Dillon to acknowledge, and that was seconded by Gearbaugh. City Manager O'Toole and I guess the City Treasurer isn't in attendance this evening, and I think Mr. Harrington stepped out for a moment. Do you want to comment?
Certainly. So the need for this position has become apparent based on staff capacity at the time and existing projects that we have in the hopper. As we know, we have some pretty large-scale capital projects underway, and our city engineer is a part-time employee. So paying attention to smaller capital projects, our parks projects, our non-motorized plans, unfortunately, has just not been something that she can sustain. At the same time, we have a great need within our building department to identify an individual who will take ownership of the new development process. It is perfectly compatible that these two positions would be shared by someone with an engineering background, ideally a more junior staff who could learn underneath our city engineer and become not only a staff member capable of executing those portions of their job duties, but redundancy for that position, because again, it is a part-time position, so having additional assistance in-house would be greatly appreciated. We have identified that the building department's permit fees and revenues are well ahead of budget projections. This job is specifically tied to how well that department is performing and how great the demand is based on new development being a large contributing factor of its duties. So it would be funded entirely through permit fees. Certainly if something dramatically changed, that gives us the opportunity to ramp up and ramp down those types of projects in that type of position. But for the time being, we don't see any let up in the interest that we have on new development, and this is an opportunity for our staff to keep up with that pace.
So in layman's terms, for the public's benefit, permits cover this position.
Correct.
So it doesn't require reconfiguration of our budget or identification of a new funding stream.
Correct. All of those budget line items you see are related to the community development and building department and fee specific.
Well, as you and I discussed when we reviewed the agenda last Wednesday, this is something I would support. I would refer back to comments I made, I believe, in December or November of 2021 when we kicked off our strategic planning process in the previous calendar, or for the previous fiscal year, in which I expressed a desire, in light of these uncertain economic times, of focusing on core services and not creating new expenditures that may overburden the organization. But because of the importance of establishing this position and because we are using existing revenue, I fully support staff's recommendation. And if there's a subsequent motion to authorize it, we'll be voting in the affirmative. Are there questions for city staff? Councilmember Dillon.
Thank you. I had an opportunity to speak to the city manager earlier who answered some of my questions. I think my biggest question right now is, in looking at this position, this is a junior position with a salary range of mid-40s to mid-50s. We're talking about almost $50,000 in addition to that in benefits for being an in-house position. Would the city be in a better position to just contract the services for this and not take on an actual employee to which we are then tied to benefits and longevity? And we also would have the option to kind of turn on and off that switch of when funding is not available, we just stop services, versus you bring somebody in, and if our building department, all of a sudden permits dry up, we have no funding source. And so then you're talking about laying off a new employee. So I'd like to kind of look at that option. The other piece is that buried sort of in the job description is that this person is going to serve as the staff liaison to our Historic District Commission, which is something that we've talked about extensively. I'm the council rep to that. Mr. Gearbog might be able to also speak to it. That position itself requires extensive amounts of time devoted to it. And understanding, you know, having somebody from the building department, I think, is absolutely the essential way to go to it. How much of their time is going to be available to do that? And understanding where all these pieces kind of come together. I'm just not 100% sure right now that we're trying to fit a lot of bullet points for the job description into a junior level position.
I think we were very thoughtful as a group in identifying what would go into this position. Myself, City Engineer Humphreys, and Director Harrington met to consider what roles and responsibilities would be reasonable. I don't feel that what is in the job description is an overreach by any stretch. We don't have a large number of parks projects in the hopper. We do need someone to take ownership of the projects that we do in terms of overseeing our consultants. To the question of whether we should just outsource this work, I mean, that's precisely the problem. We need an engineer in-house who has ownership and oversight over those consultants. Asking a consultant to oversee consultants really takes away the power from us as an organization to ensure that we're getting the product that we want at the end of the day. And frankly, sometimes creates more work for us as a staff when we don't. So it is a strong preference of our team that this would be an in-house position, precisely so that it is, you know, a part of our shared vision for the outcome of those projects. And regarding the development side of things, certainly I think there is a benefit to having that as an in-house position, simply because we've seen, you know, what it costs to have our consultants assist us with those type of activities, and it is much higher than this. When you have a project manager that's making $200 to $250 an hour, that's going to add up much more quickly than a junior level staff member who, yes, is, you know, has benefits that will ultimately be 40 to 50% of their total salary or more. And I will say, for your benefit all, we assume the highest level of benefits. So if this is the person we end up hiring is a single person, it'll be considerably less. So we assumed family benefits and opting into every benefit we have.
And that's our standard practice.
That is when we estimate wages, we always estimate the very highest benefit.
Okay.
Can I also add that for some of the work that this position would be accomplishing and doing, we already are paying consultants to do it, and it's not that we're displeased with the product, but it takes a long time. It really stalls the development process to constantly have to send things back to a consultant for an additional layer of review, rather than having someone that's dedicated to doing that in-house. So I think it will expedite a lot of the processes. It will help streamline aspects of the building department. And then, as City Manager O'Toole said, I think that we need people to take ownership of some of this. And yes, it's a lot of bullet points on a list for an entry-level position, but I think that's true for most people in smaller communities, that we're all wearing many different hats at different times. I'm overseeing an engineer, but myself have no engineering background or experience other than how it relates and intersects in odd places with planning. So I don't think it's an unreasonable thing to ask, and I think someone that's really interested in tackling a variety of projects at the start of their career will be happy to kind of push in different directions and will be able to play out the biggest strengths that they bring to the table. What out of these lists are they most interested in? And we can really push that person to excel in those areas and really make Saline special in those ways.
No, and I understand that, and trust me, some of these projects are near and dear to my heart. You know, everyone that knows me knows how long have I been advocating for our pickleball court and our dog parks, and our sidewalk program that have sort of all stalled out because they're missing that element of that ownership of a project. I'm just concerned about bringing somebody on in that, you know, we're saying, oh, we expect to have excess revenues of 140, to which we're gonna take 95,000 of that towards a salary. And I mean, it doesn't leave a lot of wiggle room there and a lot of extra dollars for other things that I'm sure this was not just money that we found in the couch cushions. I mean, this money went someplace before this. It just hasn't been sitting around. So, I mean, just kind of understanding, like, are we gonna have to forego something? And that's why I don't like doing these things outside of a budgeting cycle, because I like to look bigger picture at, okay, if we're giving, what are we taking? And understanding that piece of it.
Right.
So I just want to make sure.
And maybe it might help to know some more of the cost-cutting measures that we've implemented in the building department. Previously, we had a contractor, not an official employee, doing all our plan review and permit processing. And we had less than desirable results with some other aspects occurring in the department. So we really started to shift things to move that workload from a contractor who's paid hourly to staff members that are paid full-time. And that should reduce fees going out of the department quite substantially. Hopefully will increase other productivity measures and other streamlining measures that will also cut down on the need to utilize some contractors more than others for inspections and other things, and bring those more in-house as well, which would once again really lower some of the costs we have going out and have some more revenue thus to work on these specific projects in this specific position. So I don't have exact figures or all that information for you right now, but I'd be happy to follow up with you afterwards.
I will also add that we expect that the code enforcement services contract that we have to close out open permits will be ending soon. We've kind of reached the maximum efficiency in terms of what that contract can do, so that will be an expense that we won't be realizing moving forward, and will free up some additional revenues. But again, just the $140,000 that Treasurer Cole provided for us as reference is new revenue. So not anticipated in our budget. So those weren't dollars that were previously earmarked and we're freeing up. That is the trajectory that we see the department on, at least for the next 2 to 3 years, while we keep up with the pace of current projects on our horizon.
Mr. Harrington, perhaps you could do this to the questions that Ms. Dillon asked, specific about the management of your department, and then you responded that there have been some changes and some reforms, some cost-cutting measures. If you could dive a little bit deeper into those, maybe in your monthly communicator department report, and then the city manager can disseminate that as part of her, weekly communique, which is sent out on Friday afternoon. Okay?
Perfect.
Thank you.
Mr. Kamara-Sulak, thank you.
Yes, thank you. I acknowledge all the importance of our infrastructure and all the responsibilities that have fallen on our city engineer, and the importance of our community development and what you're doing. So I see a lot of need and support this addition. I guess my question is, looking at the job description, not so much the length of it, but is that paying enough for a entry-level?
We did do a market
engineer?
study, and I will, maybe I need to clarify. This is a junior level position, but not necessarily an entry level position. So it could be someone who has a bachelor's degree already and like internship experience or something like that. Not really a true entry level, because we do still want them to be able to take ownership of some of our simpler parks projects themselves. But we did do a wage study. We used MML wage data as a comparison, and that's where we developed the range from. And I mean, as far as the job description goes, this is actually kind of on the lower to middle range of the total list of responsibilities for most of our staff. So this is certainly not even the most comprehensive of job descriptions that we have.
I don't see it as overwhelming at all. I'm just concerned, are we going to get strong candidates based, it just looks like a low salary range to me for, a junior engineer, but I just asking that, and
Sure.
we have our wage study, and we'll see what happens.
Yep.
I fully support this.
Certainly the market will tell us if we're wrong, but the best we can do is go on the data that we have available to us. The MML wage data was updated most recently, I believe in July or August of 2022, so relatively recent.
Mayor Protem Kirba.
I kind of want to echo Ms. Dillon's statements about, the building department. As you'll know, on our audit, we have a footnote that talks about $1 million plus shortfall that we've always had. And it continues to grow depending on what's happened in the past where we haven't necessarily properly upsized or downsized in terms of how things gone. So for me, understanding this, and I'm glad that we're approaching it as a more holistic approach, looking at the entire department, but it is that concern that when we do hit those periods of time that we have in place the ability to either reduce staff or reduce hours or whatever. And I know that's not necessarily something that we have adopted, but because this is such a volatile type situation, that we have a plan in place for that.
I would agree with you completely. I think this particular position is so closely tied to demand for those services that it would be one that was more flexible.
And at least these type of services, which I've been promoting too, is that these type of things should be charged to developers when we can, and a whole building department, because we have ineffectively shoved costs onto general funds that never should have been on there and subsidized operations. So whatever we're doing and whatever you're doing, Mr. Harrington, in order to achieve a better understanding and through our redeveloping of fees or whatever we're doing in terms of reassigning efforts, I 100% support that. And I'm moving forward with this position because we've talked about this. This definitely is a need. Our customer services has suffered as a result of it. We've had individuals have to return multiple times to meetings. This is just something that I think it'll improve our community and make a better approach. It's just when we hit those low spots, we as a council need to be able to make the, and take it and bite the bullet that we may have to let some staff go or reduce. So, thank you.
I do think that's an interesting point. I reflect back, I was the only existing member of council who was serving on the dais at this time. Mr. Seo was part of the organization, but in a much different capacity. But when I started, and this would have been true when Mr. Gearbaugh was on council as well in the early 2000s, we had, of course, the director of community development was then building and engineering. He was an engineer, and we had an assistant engineer. And when the world essentially fell apart, metaphorically speaking, of course, in circa 2009, 2010, we did not have the need for 2 engineers. And luckily, we utilized some flexibility and transferred somebody over to DPW to fill a retirement. Had that not been the case, it would have likely resulted in a layoff from this organization. So I think the point about flexibility is important, specifically noting the job responsibilities for this position. I think if we're all clear on that, it's good. But the understanding that if things change or this community or state or nation more broadly takes a dip economically, we may have to make some adjustments.
Right, and maybe now it's not the time to do this, but I think Saline is uniquely positioned in a way that it wasn't in 2008 and 2009. Our workforce is nowhere near as closely tied to consumer spending, the auto industry, as the rest of southeastern Michigan has historically tied its fate to. Ann Arbor has a bustling economy of different engineering jobs, different university jobs. There are far more resilient to shocks in the economy. There's just different sects of labor that we've now attracted and different residents that we have now that we didn't have 15 years ago. And I think that will make a substantial difference in the event of another recession, and recessions are inevitable, the economist in me speaking, but I think that we're a much better positioned community to take on some of those shocks and those grunts than we were in 2008 and 2009, from my understanding of what the labor makeup was here then versus what it is now.
I think it's probably correct, although I will say, having been around in the mid-2000s, I heard that, 2006, we've hit rock bottom. And then it was 2007. No, this is it. It can't go any lower. And then, of course, we hit 2008 and 2009. And I'm reminded of the quote from Chairman Mao that it's always darkest before it's completely black. So maybe I'm a bit jaded, but your point is well taken. Any additional comments, questions from the dais? You didn't think I was going to quote Chairman Mao, did you?
I did not, no.
I'm not surprised.
We have a motion on the floor, moved by Dillon, seconded by Gearbaugh, to acknowledge receipt of the memo from Community Development Director Harrington. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, say nay. Ayes have it, the motion carries unanimously. Is there a motion now to authorize or not authorize?
Move to authorize.
Moved by Seal to authorize.
Second.
Seconded by Kamir Sulak. Is there any additional discussion on the motion? Then we'll proceed to vote. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, say nay. Ayes have it, the motion carries unanimously. We move on to new business, item 22-288, First Amendment to purchase agreement, First Amendment for the purchase agreement of Lot 20A. As the city manager indicated earlier, we're not prepared to take action, so the chair would entertain a motion to postpone this item to our next regular meeting on December 5th, 2022. Moved by Gearbaugh, seconded by Seal. All those in favor of postponing, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, say nay. Ayes have it, the motion carries unanimously. We move on to the third item under new business, which is agenda item 22-289, resolution on irrigation meter fees. This will be a motion. Let's start with a motion to acknowledge receipt. Moved by Gearbaugh, is there a second?
Second.
Seconded by, I'll let Kamir Sulak be the second on that. City Manager O'Toole, do you want to comment on this issue before we consider the adoption or, I guess, potential rejection of resolution number 22-289?
Certainly. So this is a resolution to amend the fee book to change the 3/4-inch residential meter, second meter purchase price to $290, consistent with the actual price under our new master meter program. It also changes the fee book to no longer require that the valves, the check valves, be purchased directly from us. If residents find it necessary, they can purchase them through their plumbers, or they would still be available through us so long as we're capable of maintaining an inventory.
And assuming this resolution is adopted, are there any additional steps, policies, ordinances that need to be adjusted or changed to reduce the costs of an additional meter?
Not to reduce the cost, but to improve the efficiency of processing it. Community Development Director Harrington will be bringing a change. Right now, the second meter irrigation permit application requires my personal signature rather than just being processed through the building department. It is the only permit that I'm aware of that I have to sign off on, which I find very interesting because I don't have any of the background context to be signing off on those things. So we'd recommend a change just to streamline that to make it a simpler process.
That seems pretty reasonable. Is my assumption correct that that policy change will be on a subsequent agenda, either at our December 5th meeting or the 19th?
Yeah, we could easily have that.
Okay, very good. Are there questions for city staff regarding this issue? Mr. Seal.
Yes, what is the actual reduction in the cost of the meter?
So right now, it's listed at $400, and this brings it down to $290. But again, the check valves may still be necessary, but those would likely be at a lower cost than we can find them for.
So it's a fair reduction.
Yes.
$110. Any additional questions? Let me go to Mayor Pro Tem Gearbaugh and then Mr. Delorco.
As you mentioned, other potential things, we're talking about smart meters that would, at some time in the future, will that be some option, or what would we do in terms of conserving? We talked about Pittsfield as a...
Yeah, we've talked about approaching that from an ordinance perspective. I think we've also discussed it as a condition of future development agreements. I think development agreements are probably the easiest way to implement something like that, making it a condition of any new projects coming in.
Or would that be achieved through a different type of meter or some other type of technology or valve?
So that's additional technology. So that's additional technology that the builder or homeowner would put in themselves, separate from our meters.
I just want to clarify that so that it wasn't confusing. Thank you.
And we're still, to Mr. Gearbaugh's point, we're still going to move forward expeditiously to try and modify whatever policy or create a standard by which new developments would have to install smart meters.
Correct.
Okay, very good. Mr. Delorco, Councilmember Delorco.
Thank you. I'm just trying to understand for the public's edification what all the 290 includes. So does that include all the charges associated with getting the second meter, meaning the inspection of the meter and the fittings, et cetera?
No, the 290 is just the hard cost of the meter. So it is just for the physical instrument. The costs for inspection are separate, and that's...
Yep, so it's a $25 plumbing application fee and a $60 residential inspection, but we've been waiving the application fee in this instance as I've been processing them myself, just to save the consumer $25. It's not substantial, but it's what my department could chip into the the effort to lower the meter costs.
So the actual cost to the homeowner is significantly higher than $290.
It's $350 for the meter and the inspection. And then whatever the plumber charges, or the homeowner's able to install it themselves, so.
So,
Another $60 as long as he waives the $25 application fee.
But that plumbing fee is contractual, that we have to pay. We don't have an on-staff plumbing inspector, so we have to pay $60 to that individual to perform the work.
so if I'm the homeowner and I'm doing my own plumbing and I just connect the meter and it's city-supplied meter connection fittings, only connected to the faucets in my home and not any groundwater system, my actual cost is still $290.
Well, it still needs to be
Still be
inspected.
inspected, regardless of whether a contractor does it or a homeowner does it. There's a couple reasons for that.
Hardware is $290, the inspection is $60.
Yeah, I'm just trying to understand why, because when we looked at this contract to move it with Core Main, I seem to remember Director Searle saying that the master meters were half the price of the city's currently owned Neptune meters.
Yep. Mr. Sherrill, Director Sherrill, excuse me, can
I never
comment.
said half. I said we might see a significant savings, and we did. The former meter, the exact same size meter, 400 some dollars was the meter. This one's $290. All the other inspections and fees are still on the $400 Neptune meter. This one is $290. It's just the unit pricing. We didn't update the fee book because our single unit pricing wasn't available yet.
Our cost for this just piece of plastic now is $290.
$290
Okay.
for the meter,
All right,
for
I-
single unit meter pricing for a 3/4 inch meter.
For context, the return on investment, if you are irrigating your system, is probably about one summer, because that's about 29,000 gallons of use, which could easily, and we have seen is quite easily used by anyone who's regularly using their irrigation system.
Pretty conservative estimate, actually.
So, yeah, I was basically looking for a break for the homeowners, and if we're getting it down to $350 total expenditure as opposed to what we were hearing before, which was around $1,000, that was more than the homeowner could bear.
Again, it's only for the equipment. It's still going to cost them to have the installed, so the plumbing bill, if they don't do it themselves, could.
Right, most homeowners would usually go through a plumber. Like, yes, you can do it yourself. I don't know enough to do it myself. Granted,
but
I grew up in a
If
city.
if it's still costing the homeowners $1,000 to get this installed at the end of the day, I don't see real
We can't,
traction.
yeah, we can't, I mean, we can't control the fees that plumbers cost. It is going to be, it is a relatively simple app installation. Our hope would be that the plumber's charging less than a couple $100, but this is as low as we can bring it in terms of hard costs. Again, all that the customer is bearing now is our hard cost for the meter and our hard cost for the plumbing inspector.
Okay, all right, thank you.
I mean, I get your point, Councilmember DeLaRocco, that there's still a significant cost to the homeowner to install this second meter, especially if they're not equipped, and I certainly am not, with plumbing expertise to do it yourself. I think the point would be that we're moving this in the right direction and reducing cost and providing them some level of benefit, in my judgment. Yeah. Councilmember Dillon.
Thank you. So just a quick question. We are not taking this fee retroactive, correct? It's from this day forward.
Correct. That is how this has been presented. And to be fair, I mean, in a lot of cases, we wouldn't be able to because they might have not have gotten this meter, so. And if they got the check valves and the meter, then they already got the full value of the $400.
Very good. We have a motion on the floor, moved by Gearboss, seconded by Kamara Sulak, simply to acknowledge receipt. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed say nay. Ayes have it, the motion carries unanimously. Is there a motion now to adopt or not to adopt resolution number 22-289?
Motion to adopt.
I'm going to let Kamara Sulak be the second, or mover, and Kraus be the second, excuse me. Is there any subsequent discussion on the motion? There is none. All those in favor of adopting say aye.
Aye.
Opposed say nay. Ayes have it, the motion carries unanimously. We move on to agenda item 4, which is 22-290 Rec Center feasibility study. Let's start with the motion to acknowledge receipt of the memo from Parks and Rec Director Scruggs. It actually doesn't have a date on it, so it's just a motion to acknowledge receipt. Moved by Mayor Pro Tem Gearboss. Is there a second?
Second.
Seconded by Councilmember Dillon. Director Scruggs, would you mind coming to the podium and talking a little bit about this issue? And if you could, either you or the city manager, if you want to address primarily for the public's benefit, the amendment to the budget that will allow for us to free up just shy of 60,000 for this work.
Sure. So as you may recall, the Recreation Center Sustainability Task Force, part of their recommendations when we did the presentation last April was to complete a feasibility study. And in October, or actually in late September, we sent out an RFQ to several companies that do this type of work. Also, our city clerk put it on BidNet. I think that's what it's called, BidNet. And we received 2 proposals, one being Barry Dunn, the other one Sports Facilities Company. And after reviewing both of the proposals and what the work they were going to do based on our scope of work, it was a clear choice to go with Barry Dunn. At that point, we asked for them to send their fee schedule, for the scope of the project, and it came in at $59,960. We had estimated when we were proposing this that it would be up to about $50,000, so it's a little bit more than what we anticipated. However, in their proposal, it's extremely detailed, engaging a lot of our community leaders, you all, city staff, city input sessions, doing SWOT analysis, demographics, preparing trend analysis. I mean, it's just extremely detailed, exactly what we're looking for. And so tonight we're requesting approval to move forward with this. Their timeline to complete this, if approved, would be about 10 weeks. Depending on the holiday, I don't know how quickly we'll get going on that. But regarding the funding of this, I talked with our city treasurer, and we would be at the end of the fiscal year reassigning some of our fund balance in order to pay for this. It is not currently in a specific line item, but it would be reassigned at that point.
Very good. For my council colleagues' benefit, you and I may have discussed this previously, and if I'm being forgetful, my apologies. Barry Dunn, is that the same company, maybe rebranded, that did work for Canton Township?
Yes, Green Play was their original name, and then they are now called Barry Dunn. They have quite a bit of experience in exactly what we're looking for in other communities here in Michigan and throughout the nation.
Yeah, thank you. And just for my council colleagues' benefit, you'll recall that not only did our Sustainability Task Force tour the municipal recreation complex in Canton Township, but a member of our committee is the director there and a Saline community resident. And he spoke very highly of the services that then Green Play, now Barry Dunn, provided.
Correct.
Very good. Mr. Gearbaugh, as a member of the Sustainability Task Force, is there any comment or question that you'd like to make at this time?
Not at this time.
Okay. City Manager O'Toole, anything you'd like to add? No? Okay, questions from the dais? Councilmember Dillon?
Thank you. When I look at what the ask was in the bid of like the introduction to the project, it talks about, best utilization, build outs, things like that. What it doesn't address is whether the rec center is actually a feasible asset for the city to maintain. I thought that was something we were going to talk about, whether or not it's actually viable for the city. And like in its current state, whether we should be looking at privatization, we're looking at county takeover, sale of it in any, whatever the case may be. I thought we were gonna look at it in different scenarios. Because I'm concerned that if we're just looking at it as, okay, well, we just need to raise rates, or we just need to build a splash pad and that'll bring them. I feel like we've seen that movie before, and we just keep getting to that same point and we stall. And so, I mean, just sort of getting a longer, bigger picture of the long-term goals.
So part of what they're doing is they're doing financial modeling. They're looking at feasibility regarding the future, preparing operational budgets, what would be feasible and how can we sustain this. So they are addressing, I believe, what exactly you're asking.
Okay.
And actually, the City Manager O'Toole and I had that exact conversation when we were developing the agenda this past Wednesday, because private-public partnerships, a change in the organizational structure, the future of the facility, and that particular amenity within our municipal portfolio have to be a component of this feasibility study. It's absolutely essential.
And I apologize if it says in here and I missed it. What is the time frame for completing this?
Their timeframe is a 10-week timeframe. They have it as like 1 through 10 deliverables, and they have it timed out where, actually it would be about 12 weeks to complete. Like I said, if we approve it tonight, we have a holiday coming up now and in a couple of, 3 weeks from now. So I'm not sure where we would begin. There's a little bit of, the first couple of deliverables are us providing information, our master plans, our input that we've received over the past few years when we did our input sessions in 2019, any type of surveying that we have. So they would be, we would be providing quite a bit of information that I would say in this next month, and then they would go from there after the first of the year.
Yeah, I was about to say, I think a conservative estimate for the council and for the community is we can certainly get them whatever data they need between now and the end of the calendar year, but I would suspect most of their work will begin in haste in the first quarter of 2023.
So how will that coincide with our budgeting?
I think that would be fine.
Is that
I mean,
going
we would
to-
be completed by March.
Yeah, I mean, the goal would be to have this information to inform our budgeting process.
Okay, that was my goal, is that
Yes.
we have it on the front end of budgeting for consideration. Thank you very
We
much.
should be able to complete the process by March.
For sure.
Yeah. Okay. Additional questions for Director Scruggs or staff? Mr. Mayor Pro Tem Gearbaugh?
Not question, just a statement, but go ahead if there's other questions.
Any additional questions? No? Go ahead, Mr. Gearbaugh.
Yeah, I believe, this is, again, a study that we keep doing, but this is the opportunity time now to do for me, to really look at what is the feasibility of this. I'm thinking our audits coming forward, we know we had to contribute more than we anticipated. Maybe not as more, but it's still a significant hit on the general fund. I do agree with the mayor that this is clearly the time now to look at potentially organizational structure, funding structure, or even now with the recent bond millage passed by the schools, potentially other partnerships or whatever else that could happen. So we need some document in order to try and start those kind of negotiations or even discussions. So I'm going to be in favor of this motion.
Let's vote on the motion we have on the floor, which is simply to acknowledge it. Carla, thank you. Appreciate your work on
Yeah,
it.
you're welcome.
Hang tight, because you're up
Right.
on deck for the next agenda item as well. We do have a motion moved by Mayor Pro Tem Gearbaugh, seconded by Councilmember Dillon, simply to acknowledge receipt. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed say nay. Ayes have it, the motion carries unanimously. Is there a motion now to approve or not to approve?
Move to approve.
Moved by Mayor Pro Tem Gearbaugh to approve. Is there a second?
Second.
Seconded by CO. Any additional discussion? Appears to be none. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed say nay. Ayes have it, the motion carries unanimously. Move on to agenda item 5 under new business, which is 22-298, resolution on rec center fees. This will be a motion to acknowledge receipt of the memo from Parks and Rec Director Scruggs and to adopt or not to adopt resolution number 22-298 for the setting of 2023 rec center membership fees.
Move to acknowledge receipt and to adopt.
Moved by CO to acknowledge receipt and adopt. Is there a second?
Second.
Seconded by Kamara Sulak. Director Scruggs, if you'd like to begin, and then this was also an issue that we did not meet, but it was discussed via email by the members of the Rec Center Sustainability Task Force. So subsequent to your remarks, if City Manager O'Toole would like to comment, she's a member of that group, as is Mr. Gearbaugh. I would welcome that perspective.
Certainly.
As well as that of Deputy Directors.
I have Ms. Lambert here to help as well.
I apologize, Sunshine, that I didn't call on you on the last issue. So if you would like to make a comment on this, we would welcome that.
So part of the Rec Center Sustainability Task Force recommendations was In July, or in January, we would be increasing our fees, our membership fees across the board, 1.5%. And since July, quite a bit of our, hard costs, our paper products, our chemicals for our pools, everything has kind of gone well above the 1.5% of rate of inflation. And so Sunshine and I took some time prior to contacting the rec task force to say, is 1.5% enough to kind of sustain us for this next year? So Sunshine ran a few numbers, crunched some numbers. We kind of evaluated all of our fees, our daily fees, and ongoing, this has nothing to do with this, but all of our programming fees, we evaluate those all the time. Like every quarter, whenever we're doing our brochures, we do make quite a few adjustments for those things, such as swim lessons, tennis lessons, jujitsu, some of our other programs. But regarding the membership fees and daily fees, we ran a few numbers, and we came up with some 1.5% projections, 3%, 5%, 6%. And at this time, our recommendation is January 1 that we would be increasing our membership fees, which is all of our different plans from individual to dual to family, resident, non-resident, by 6%. And then we also did a little bit of work with the daily fees and looking at how many of those that we sell for the year. And our largest number is our youth fees, which we have not changed since, 2006. We have not increased those rates at all, and which are currently $5. So we're suggesting that we raise the youth fee to the same as what a senior fee is, which, by the way, the senior and youth monthly member, or the annual membership fee and monthly membership fees are the same. So it would just kind of bringing that youth fee up to what a senior fee is. So that's our recommendation, and looking for.
Lambert, anything you'd like to add?
No, I'd just like to reiterate, as we reviewed this, it was apparent that we really needed to be a little bit more aggressive than the 1.5% that we had, reviewed several months ago. So I think the 6% will put us more in line to catch up with all of our costs that we're seeing. In addition, Director Scruggs, she's is on every 2 weeks you have your directors meetings, and we're seeing other municipalities doing the same throughout. So anywhere from 5 to 10%, I believe.
Actually, City of Troy is raising their fees 15% for residents and 20% for non-residents. Yeah. So it's fluctuating between 5 and 20%.
I do want to thank you both, because the information and data reports that you provided to the Rec Center Task Force was very thorough. So it was easy to make an informed decision when you're provided with that level of data. So thank you for that. City Manager O'Toole, anything you'd like to say in regards to this proposal?
No, I'm in support.
Mayor Pro Tem Gearbaugh?
No, I agree that we need to do the increase. Actually, I was more on the upper end, because I believe that, we don't know what the rates are or the increases are going to be. So I believe Ms. Scruggs mentioned that we might do another evaluation. And of course, we'll be doing it as part of this study that we just approved too. So.
That, and also every month when our financials come out, I review them. I work with our city treasurer in reviewing those and seeing where we're at. So we keep a pretty tight handle on our expenditures and our revenues, and we can make these projections. And I would definitely, in the next 3 to 6 months, we need to keep this high on our priority list to figure out if we're meeting that.
And we'll also have a better understanding once Planet Fitness opens in January, what impact that may have.
Correct.
Thank you.
Questions for any member of the task force? Councilmember Dillon.
Thank you. Thank you very much for your graph. I think it really kind of puts things into perspective. The one thing I will say is that we talk about residents versus non-residents. When we say residents, we're talking about the school district. And there is always that conversation that, more weight is put onto the backs of city residents because we're paying other taxes and such, and that it was theoretically supposed to be offset by the CARES millage, and just understanding, like, are there still dollars flowing from that to the rec center? Where are we with those pieces? And understanding, like, should we look back into, there's a city rate, then there's the school district rate, and then there's an out-of-network rate? I mean, should we have 3 buckets?
Personally, I would prefer not to, because it's very confusing for the townships, because they have a Saline address, they have Saline schools, they go to the Saline District Library, the Saline Fire's servicing them. They don't understand the difference between, they think they live in the city. They think they live in Saline. That was one battle that we did win by creating this funding method, because all of a sudden, we started to see a great influx of memberships at that point. But I do believe that we could address this with the Barry Dunn feasibility study and take a look at those things. Potentially, we reach out to our townships to see if they could contribute somehow. I don't know how that
I mean,
would work.
that is sort of one of the things that's
Yeah.
sort of been an ongoing conversation with the townships get the benefit of using our rec center, our parks, and yet they're not contributing towards them. And it's again, it doesn't feel fair to the city residents. And so trying to find that balance of what can we offer to them, in lieu of this. The other piece that I want to understand is when we talk about this revenue snapshot, there's a yellow box on the bottom. You mentioned, like, at 6%, you're saying a 28%, $28,000 increase. Your memo indicates 50. So where are you looking at finding that additional
That's through the
funding?
daily fees.
Okay.
Yeah.
And you feel secure that $8 is going to be sufficient? I mean, even with 6%, when I look at that, I'm like, is it enough? Because I don't want to come in 3 months or 6 months and say, oh, you know what? It really wasn't enough. Just like at the memo, we're talking about, and a 1.5% increase each year till 27. I mean, I don't even want to say that at this point, because I don't know what that number could be. I mean, we could say 6 and still be on a losing side. So next year we're at 10. Well, we've already said, we're only doing a 1.5. So I want to be very mindful of what we put out there, that we're just sort of testing the waters to kind of see where we balance out. And as Mr. Gearbaugh had mentioned, I think that the opening of another gym in our area is going to definitely kind of put some ripples in the water and kind of figure out where that's going to be.
It's a lot of speculation right now, but we had a very large facility there a long time, or for years. That was Powerhouse Gym. We've had Curves, we've had Snap Fitness, we've had Fit Zone, we've had, I can name 12 other places that have come and gone from here. But Powerhouse being one of the largest ones, similar to a Planet Fitness. Some people may choose to go there. Some people may choose to go there that don't even have memberships at the rec center. That may fit their lifestyle or whatever they're looking for. But I think that the Saline Rec Center has a different attractiveness because of, we do have pools, we have the gymnasium, we have a lot of different things that those places don't have. We're more of a community-minded facility. We're attracting, our youth, our families, our teachers, a lot of our city employees are members there and use the facility. So I think it might throw a little bit of a crinkle, but not a lot. I really don't.
And then my last question is, when we talk about the dailies, especially the youth dailies at $8, at what point do we kind of get a break even of we really should be pushing them into a membership?
We encourage.
What are those returns on that?
Yeah.
Is it once a week they're coming, or are they coming 3 times a week? Where it's really a cost benefit to just sort of put them on the plan.
Some of these kids, we encourage, we have these conversations almost daily You know, we can see how much money they're spending. We're like, why don't you just buy a month membership if, you know, rather than $5 a day? They don't get it. They don't understand. They don't, it's just more convenient. They slap down the card. It's not their money. They slap down mom and dad's credit card and it gets charged. We try to help them to manage their money a little bit better, but it's kind of a losing battle.
Thank you very much.
Additional questions for Director Scruggs or Deputy Director Lambert? No? Thank you. Thank you both. Appreciate your work on this. Is there any subsequent discussion on the motion? There appears to be none. It's been properly moved by CO, seconded by Camara Sulak to acknowledge and to adopt. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed say nay. Ayes have it, the motion carries unanimously. Move on to the last business under new business, which is item 6, agenda item 22-303, investment selection and resolution. This will be a motion to acknowledge receipt of the memo from City Treasurer Cole and to approve or not to approve the appointment of Michael Berry from PFM Advisors as the investment advisor, and to adopt or not to adopt resolution number 22-303 to join the Governments of Michigan Investing Cooperatively, it's GOV-MIC.
Move to acknowledge, approve, and to adopt.
Easy enough. Is there a second?
Second.
Seconded by CO. In City Treasurer Cole's absence, Ms. O'Toole, would you care to comment?
Absolutely. This is a huge win. It's unfortunate that Treasurer Cole can't be here tonight, but this is something that I know that she has worked very diligently on to identify the best solution for our organization. Currently, as she noted in the memo, the city has been earning about a 1.9% weighted average on its investments, several millions of dollars spread across different funds, some earning as little as 0.01%. She is proposing a consolidation of those assets and holding them in a well-respected and well-trusted program in terms of the Governments of Michigan Investing Cooperatively program. The investment advisor for that would be a single point of contact for us, rather than the treasurer herself having to administer several smaller investment portfolios, so to speak, as was done in the past. Conservatively, the estimates suggest that if we're able to achieve market returns that are 3 to 5% higher than we have historically, that would mean roughly $500,000 in new investment revenue annually.
Thank you, City Manager O'Toole. This is a clear and unambiguous win. It's interesting. One of the first conversations I had with the City Treasurer after she came on board was she asked me a question about deficiencies or opportunities within the organization. And it was very serendipitous because I had just spoken to Mayor Pro Tem Gearbaugh about the very subject, about the fact that as an organization, we do not get as much of a return on our investments as we should. And having a much more aggressive investment policy and strategy would be beneficial to the organization and ultimately to the city of Saline. So this is an important first step. There's certainly more that we can do and should be doing in the ensuing months and years, but this is something that I enthusiastically support and, again, will yield benefits to the community in the years and months ahead. Questions or comments? Mayor Pro Tem Gearbaugh.
I just want to appreciate your leadership and Ms. Cole's leadership. This is something I've been pushing for the last couple of years. It took the emphasis and the skill set of someone to really jump into this and do it. And it's equivalent to almost a mill or more. And if we get that kind of return, that's a savings to our whole community. So I appreciate you making this a priority and implementing this at this time. Thank you.
Very good. Any additional comments or questions? Ms. Dillon.
Thank you. Did we have some sort of resolution where we had to keep money in certain places or anything like that? Do we have anything we have to rescind? I felt like we had rules about like where we were investing. I don't know if those were just sort of public facing. We want to invest in our community.
We do have an investment policy, and we are subject to certain federal and state regulations regarding how we can invest, but this cooperative meets and aligns with all of those standards. So we are really funneling all of our investments into one cooperative, but certainly the actual use of dollars within that fund will vary.
That does bring up one question.
Let me see if Councilmember Dillon has any additional.
So then is there anything we need to do with like any of our local banks? Do we need to change our policy that like because I thought we had rules like we couldn't have more than X amount of dollars in one specific place.
That would be a question best shared with Treasurer Cole, but my understanding is that's probably more related to our actual, like, checking accounts and not our investment accounts.
If you would follow up with Treasurer
Sure.
Cole tomorrow or later this week and respond to Councilmember Dillon's inquiry, that would be great.
Thank you.
Let me jump back real quick to Mr. Gearbaugh, and then I'll come to you, Mr. CO.
Just the question, did our local banks or anything have a concern and they're aware of this policy? Were we forthcoming to any of them?
I don't know that we've had a direct conversation. I mean, the things that we're holding in local banks, like Bank of Ann Arbor is a very, very small 0.1, 0.2% return certificates of investment, so not very sizable. The majority of these assets have been held in like the Michigan class, which is just about a 2.5% average return for the last year. So
No, that's fine. I just wanted to make sure any of our local banks that were aware of that change. I do know there was some other changes that Ms. Cole made that brought us into alignment that may have us in a more secure place. So, Ms. Dillon, that may address some of your other issues. Thank you.
Mr. CO?
Of late, even the local banks have been raising their interest rates. I know the Saline Lundenburg Friendship Group just went out last week to renew a certificate of deposit, and we were pleasantly surprised when we went to the bank to find that they had greatly increased their rate of interest. So it might be worth challenging some of the locals to have them sharpen their pencil too.
Thank you, Mr. CO. Any additional comments or questions on the motion? No, then we do have a motion on the floor moved by Gearbaugh, seconded by CO. If there's no discussion, all those in favor of acknowledging, approving, and adopting, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, say nay. Ayes have it, and the motion carries unanimously. Let's transition to the discussion portion of our agenda. First up is commission, committee, and task force reports from council members. I'll start to my left and end to my right. Councilmember Del Orco, any commission, committee, or task force reports?
Briefly, the Environmental Commission met, and we spent the bulk of our time reviewing and analyzing data that had come back from the success of the recycling programs that have been rolled out to the community events, namely Summerfest and Oktoberfest, and looking for ways to improve upon that in the years ahead with better signs and clear instructions to minimize the potential of contaminating the waste stream.
Very good. Mayor Pro Tem Gearbaugh, any commission, committee, or task force reports?
Planning, we simply had another review of another marijuana shop in town near the museum, which in itself has a concern, but that was only brought forward by one of the members. As the risk management group met last week, we will be moving forward with interviewing all of our new staff. We were surprised. We have 7 new individuals that haven't been interviewed since we first conducted this committee and task force, and so we'll be meeting with those for about an hour to provide their new information and kind of get their ideas of what they see as either new risks or concerns and how they've been addressing them over the last year. So that's all I have at this time.
Very good. One deficiency, also on that planning commission agenda was a review of the proposed Planet Fitness in the old Ace Hardware and Powerhouse Gym space, which Director Scruggs and you and several others made reference to just moments ago. I believe that issue, the special land use specifically, will be on the next council agenda, which is December 5th.
That is correct.
Very good. Assuming they get their that approval, I think they'll start pulling building permits with the expectation that they would open sometime in the first quarter of 2023.
They've already started pulling building permits. It's contingent on the final site plan, actually, not on the test.
That's right. Excuse me. So, but I think the latter point still holds, which I think they articulated us an opening sometime in the first quarter of 2023.
That is correct. I think they said January is their aim.
Okay. Very good. Councilmember Dillon, any commission, committee, or task force reports?
We'll just start with a few. HDC continues to meet monthly. We've actually had meetings every single month, I think, this year. Which is a good thing that we've got a great partnership going with those individuals that live in our historic districts. And we want to keep our homes in compliance. So we're appreciative of that. The fire board will be meeting for its next meeting on Wednesday, December 7th at 6 p.m. And I believe we'll have a 5 p.m. work meeting. With that, the strategic planning committee has gone through its process. Manager O'Toole has pretty much taken the lead on that one. We have put out requests, we've vetted candidates, and we're moving through that process. We currently have some internal meeting dates scheduled in early January, and once we get through that aspect of it, we will move into a public phase.
Real quick, I apologize
Yes.
for everybody. Can you confirm for the public's benefit and for city council the consultant that we will be using?
Yes, Diana Wong.
Very good. Some of you recall, she actually was the facilitator of our large business summit we had earlier this year. Please continue, Ms.
No,
Dillon. I
that's fine.
apologize.
Nope. Just something I failed to mention just recently, the city of Saline is part of the Urban County Executive Committee, and we were distributed some funds. The city is taking the approach that we are going to stack our funds. You're allowed to stack them for up to 5 years. It's a relatively small amount, but in stacking it, it will relate to some new projects, including some ADA ramps that we are in need of and crosswalks in the downtown area. So we'll look forward to that. And the only other thing is Andalina Farms has their monthly progress meeting that I'll be attending tomorrow.
Very good. Mr. Seo, any commission, committee, or task force reports?
Yes, Your Honor. On November the 10th, the cemetery board met here in City Hall at 3 p.m. We had probably one of the longest meetings I've ever attended, the cemetery board, and we discussed a lot of issues. Thankfully, Mr. Bernard was there from DPW. He's apparently the DPW representative for the cemetery. We discussed the fact that he's working with one of the engineering firms, is it Fleiss Vanderbrink, to bring us a potential bid for the replacement of the wooden wall along Michigan Avenue that's on the inside of the cemetery and the concrete wall along Monroe Street. Both are in disrepair and need some attention, probably replacement. But they're going to come to us and talk about the feasibility of both, what they think is necessary and what the costs might be. Also, we talked about putting a new push-button lock on the mausoleum so that people wouldn't have to come down here to City Hall, that they could call City Hall, get the combination, and enter the mausoleum. And increased accessibility might also help us with the sale of niches there for cremains, if people knew that they could more readily get into the mausoleum. We also had a member of the community, Mr. Chang Ming Fan, came to our meeting, and he generously offered to plant a couple trees in commemoration of Mr. Orange Risden's contribution to the community. He felt very badly that the gravesite itself has kind of fallen into, I don't know, it's very difficult to read because of the age of the tombstone and so on. And he's proposed maybe it would be more suitable to have some kind of a living monument to him through planting of a couple of red cedar trees, which he would donate. So we talked about that, and we talked without resolution about where something like that might be planted. We think that up near the actual grave itself might not be practical because of the proximity of other grave sites and so on, but there might be a place over by the Orange Risden original house foundation,
The historic markers.
and how that might look. So we talked about a lot of things. We talked too about additional niches with maybe a memorial wall for the placement of cremains in the memorial wall. But we thought that because we have the unsold niches in the mausoleum, it might be better to, first of all, replace the lock on the mausoleum and maybe spruce up the inside to make that more attractive for sale, for sales in there before we try and establish new niches through an additional columbarium. So that was pretty much the substance of our meeting. We're going to meet again in the month of January, and I've forgotten the exact date this time. I'll announce that at a future meeting of City Council.
Very good. Thank you. Councilmember Kamara Sulak, any commission, committee, or task force reports?
Yes, the Saline Youth Council met on Tuesday, and all the members were sworn in, and Mayor Marl addressed the youths and had some very kind and inspirational things to share. I think we have a really strong youth council, and their service to the Saline community is very commendable. And actually for this year, they're planning on expanding their volunteering. And if you want to see some of the members, they'll be carrying the Saline Chamber of Commerce banner at the parade on December 3rd. Thank you.
Thank you, and yes, you have a tremendous group of young people serving on the youth council this year. I'm anticipating some great things, so thank you for your service on that board, Mr. Kamara Sulak. Councilmember Kraus, any commission, committee, or task force reports?
Just a small one this time, arts and culture, the free little art library is finally ready to go up. We're waiting for DPW to get a window, they've been kind of busy. So as soon as they get a window, they're ready to go.
Excellent, very good. Reports or other announcements, Mr. Delorco?
I have none.
Mayor Potem Girbaugh?
I'd just like to, I think we missed talking about the master plan meeting that we had last week.
Why don't you talk about it now?
We had a very successful, about 25 to 30 people attended. We were able to break out into different groups and discuss issues, and we talked about downtown, transportation, sustainability, transportation. And Mr. Harrington will be gathering all that information together to take our next steps, which will be...
So we're still waiting on a formalized quote from Carlisle Wortman on the update to the master plan, but one of the things that we talked about as the Planning Commission Steering Committee was trying to do a brief survey. I know that there's been a lot of surveys out, so trying to keep it very brief and just collect, kind of some bare feedback from folks. In addition, if anyone is interested, I'm still taking, or we will always still be taking comment. It's a living plan, although we have a defined limit for when we're directly updating it. If you're ever interested, please feel free to send me an email or call my office or set up an e-meeting with me. I'm glad to meet with folks. So.
Thank you, Mr. Harrington. I just want to mention that Sunday, December 11th, will be our Christmas at the farm from 1 to 4. And also just to let the council know, we had an issue with the furnace this weekend, and there's going to be emergency repair at the farmhouse to replace that furnace. It was originally installed in 1948. It had a it was converted to gas in I think the late 70s, and as of this year, it's finally kicked the bucket. Probably kicked it a little while ago, but this is an emergency situation, and we're concerned with carbon monoxide concerns. So, and it was in the budget to be replaced anyway. So, just to give you all a heads up.
I would say on behalf of council and the community, I think the Historic Society has gotten their money's worth. Installed something in 1948 and made it last until the waning weeks of 2022. I think you did good. I've got two reports and announcements. One, you'll recall from communiques that I think both my office has sent out and the city manager. We are aggressively working to find development proposals for 207 Monroe Street. We hope to discuss those either on December 5th or 19th and develop consensus very shortly thereafter. Obviously, our first goal is to secure the site, to make it as attractive as is reasonably possible, but to move expeditiously to find a competent, qualified developer who can execute a project for the community's benefit on site. So we have several proposals. I guess one thing I'll articulate this evening, if there's any developer out there who's interested in the site and has a plan that would benefit the community, please direct your inquiries or suggestions to the city manager's office ASAP. The city manager did request in her weekly communique on Friday to have a couple council members help her vet proposals before they're presented to city council. I did speak to Mayor Pro Tem Girbaugh and Councilmember Dillon today. They've agreed to do that, so unless there's objection, there'll probably be 1 or 2 meetings before all the proposals are brought back to city council. And then I just wanted to remind the city manager when Councilmember Kraus completes her reports and announcements, if you wanted to make that statement regarding these abhorrent stickers that have been placed at various spots downtown promoting essentially white supremacy and intolerance, that would be great, because we do need to make a public statement regarding that type of behavior, which is not going to be accepted and is simply inexcusable. Councilmember Dillon, any reports or announcements?
Yeah, I've got a few. First, I neglected to mention that the Cable Commission meets monthly, and I want to give a huge shout out to our tech, Ben Goodman, because after about a year of supply chain issues, we have our new TV in place here, so now we can all see at the same time. We are still having a little bit of technical issues with the ones out on the side for the audience, but I think we've narrowed down those issues, so we should have those up and running soon. So very much thank you to Ben for that. We have a couple of meetings coming up. We've got our budget town hall meeting that is on December 6th at 6 p.m. And then on behalf of the Saline Chamber of Commerce, there's a few events happening in the community. The community tree lighting is Tuesday, November 29th at 6 p.m. downtown. The holiday parade is Saturday, December 3rd at 5:30, and that runs through downtown. And there is also the partnership between the Chamber and Saline area schools, specifically the Career and Technical Education Southwest Washtenaw Consortium Program. Sorry, that's a mouthful to say. They are doing an open house business showcase. It is for students that are interested in going into the tech programs, vocations. It's also for businesses to look at future work-ready workforce members. So if anyone has questions, feel free to reach out to me about that, or to the Chamber, or to Dr. Ryan Rowe at the Saline area schools. That event will happen on Thursday, December 1st from 6:30 to 8:30.
Very good. Mr. Seer, reports or announcements?
Yes, Your Honor, thank you. I'm very pleased to announce that we've had 34 people sign up for the trip next year to Lindenberg, Germany, taking place on June the 13th. That's our sister city in Germany. I got a call yesterday from Mr. Thomas Tom, who is the chair of the committee in Lindenberg, confirming that they will be able to house 34 people. He did say that they are at their upper limit because apparently they have a number of Hungarian refugees being housed in the city there. And apparently the state government in the state of Germany is paying the German citizens to put these Hungarian refugees up in their homes. So he said that it's been difficult to find spaces for everybody, but because most free rooms have been rented out to refugees, but he said they've been able to wangle space for 34 people. If anybody else is interested in attending, we can certainly put your name on the waiting list if anybody else decides that they want to withdraw. But right now, we have 34 people who've paid a deposit and intend to go. So that'll be a record number of people, I think, making the trip over this year.
Very good. Mr. Kamara Sulak, any reports or announcements?
Nothing further.
Councilmember Kraus. City Manager O'Toole.
Thank you. So recently, the city has been made aware of stickers depicting hate speech that were posted around our community. Two specific incidences, 2 weeks prior and the week prior. Our DPW responded very swiftly to get out and remove those stickers, and our police department responded by opening an investigation into the matter. This may sound like a relatively mundane response, but I'd like to stress that that is the response we will always have. Hate speech and vandalism of that nature will not be tolerated in our community, and I think our entire team is in lockstep in responding in that manner as swiftly as we can to take that kind of speech out of our community and make it clear it's not welcome here. Certainly, if any members of our community do see vandalism like this out on public property, or if they are aware of who has been involved in that vandalism, we would like to hear from you. So if you have specific complaints about vandalism on public property, you can contact the Department of Public Works directly. And if you have information about our open investigation, you can contact our police department. So the number again for DPW is 734-429-5624. And the number for our police department is 734-429-7911.
Very good. Thank you. Did you want to kick off the discussion about code review?
Certainly. I think we're looking for a very simple discussion and some direction here. I don't know if you guys have noticed, but we've been sending a lot over to code review. Ben has a lot of changes and a lot of cleanup work that he's working on. And what we're finding is in the process, some of these things are not substantive or relatively simple in nature. And by substantive, I mean they don't really change the intent of the ordinance. It's really just a matter of clarifying an administrative process or an existing understanding of an ordinance. And we would just like the opportunity to talk with you all and get direction. I think staff's preference would be if maybe some of those simpler items could just come directly rather than having to go through the full formal process.
Yeah, as you and I discussed, I would be fully in support of that. If they're innocuous, small changes, I think just bring them to city council. I think as a matter of best practice, it would be good to inform the code review committee of said action. But I think if there's a clear and unambiguous benefit to our residents, our organization, or businesses to modify, streamline, or amend an ordinance, and that is relatively innocuous, then yes, let's just bring it to city council and get it over with. That's my opinion.
Did you want to add anything?
Yeah, so if I may,
go ahead.
Mr.
Yeah.
Mayor. So I think there's another issue here too. So for some items such as, let's say, the accessory dwelling unit ordinance, I would say I'm rather indifferent about, the setbacks don't really affect me, whether you allow them 5 feet or 10 feet from a property line. Regulatorily speaking, we're enforcing it like it would be a deck at that point, not a big deal. But when we're talking about things like maybe like our SPA district, for example, that has a lot of niche and a lot of caveats to it that need to be cleaned up. And for the sake of development, for the sake of producing a classic or a great commercial corridor, to me it seems that maybe the code review is not necessarily the best forum for that, because I think there would be clear professional opinions on why is the height for a commercial building in the SPA on Michigan Avenue 15 feet less than it is everywhere else. And I would say that that's not necessarily a non-substantive change. It does have a change, it does have an effect, but I don't know if the code review is necessarily the best forum for that. If there is sort of a clear benefit, in my opinion, or a clear direction in which the city should go. Now, you're all welcome to disagree with me, and I would encourage you to do so if you have reasoning for it. But I think that kind of goes to this larger picture here of I'm all for code review for things that need a lot of review, need a lot of refinement, and need a lot of community input. But I think for some of these other items that will have substantive changes, I don't know if code review and that whole month-long process plus is necessarily the best forum for it.
I appreciate that point. I guess what I would add to that is I'm comfortable relying on staff's judgment. That's why we put you in those roles. So if you feel that the issue is of the nature that warrants or would benefit from sort of an in-depth analysis and review from a variety of stakeholders, then certainly take it to code review for discussion and for consideration. If it's something relatively simple, whether that be substantive or innocuous, and you just want to get it done, then I'm in favor of bringing it to City Council directly. Mr. Delorco, as the representative to code review, do you want to begin not begin the discussion, but respond first to the question that's been posed by staff?
Yeah, I would echo a lot of what Mr. Harrington said. I think the best place for a code review to vet an ordinance is where there's a need to do a deep dive on an issue, to vet community input, and to levy legal expertise. We have the benefit of having legal staff present at our code review meetings, and they provide us with a lot of direction on how to walk through the process of either creating an ordinance or amending an existing ordinance. We don't need to bottleneck the code review with things that require, as you described, innocuous changes that can be handled by council. I don't think that's necessary, but it definitely has its role in the organization of helping us to do a deeper dive on, for example, the accessory dwelling unit is something that I think has benefited from the code review process, the marijuana ordinance, as well as many others that have come through. So I think it certainly has its merit.
Very good. Mayor Pro Tem Gearbaugh?
Yeah, I'm fine with continuing the code review for those larger projects and things where we need to really have more assessment and involvement into it. I think some of the smaller changes and things that I've seen happen to avoid some conflicts of interest or concerns, staff probably should move them forward as long as they have adequate explanation for council at the time they make those changes. Some things have historical issues and concerns that need to be clarified. Where staff may not agree with them, it is that issue where we may have some reasoning that we want to continue some things the way we've done it. But for that perspective, I agree that let's keep the red tape to a minimum. kind of sometimes get bogged down on it. And if we can speed and expedite things, let's do it.
Very good. Councilmember Dillon?
Thank you. So I want to kind of take a quick step back because at our last meeting when we talked about code review, I made a statement that I need to apologize for because I misspoke in the way that the wording I used, in that I said that issues go to code review to die. And I didn't mean that they are not handled. It's just that as a committee that meets once a month, and sometimes it does. There are issues that if they're working on big projects and then something small comes along, does that sort of trump what's there? And we don't really have the best process in place. And so I appreciate what's being brought forward now, that there are some issues that I think could be done through staff and just sort of streamline that process. I do think that at some point we do need to sort of take a bit of a deeper dive into our process for code review, because it seems like we punt a lot of stuff over the fence to them and say, send it to code review, but we don't necessarily give them the right tools and information. And then they come back to us and we're like, well, that's not what we meant. And so I think we need to have a better understanding of what we want and what that process is going to look like. So I think that this could be a great first step, and then we can maybe, as we get into the new year, sort of look at what kind of a process we want for that, and definitely establish some timelines with it, because if we think that we're gonna send an ADU ordinance to code review and they're gonna handle it and be back to us by next meeting, I mean, I think that's completely unrealistic. But at the same time, we need to understand, is this a 2-month review? Is this a 12-month review for them? And kind of understand that.
I can add that some of the gridlock that occurs with code review is somewhat what occurs with planning and everything else, that we lean heavily on our planning consultant to produce some of those materials while they're simultaneously producing other materials. So we have a logjam of site plans. In addition, the Planning Commission is looking at site plan update or site plan review standard updates. In addition, they're looking at the ADU updates through the code review, and I could go on, but I think part of the problem here is that we have one consultant or a team of consultants, however you want to phrase the problem here, that's responsible for all these projects too, which is great, but I think, like I said, if we can start streamlining and just making line edits, if it's as simple as removing a word or changing a table in a zoning district, I think that's a lot easier to do administratively through staff, and then obviously the process already has to go through planning if it's a zoning update, and then it goes to council. So my preference is just to take stuff that I have a firm opinion on, go to planning with it, or go to you all right away, and then if you want to punt it to code review, that's definitely something that you're welcome to do. But I think that way we can at least try to work the situation in multiple different avenues. I've also started bringing things to code review that haven't originated out of you that I expected that had I brought them to you, they would have gone to code review. So it's trying to streamline the process from different angles.
Can I ask a follow-up question that my colleague, Councilmember Dillon, makes? There's an inference in her statement that I think is important. And you and I have discussed this previously. Based on the volume of work and the desire to move, obviously thoroughly, but expeditiously through the list of assignments, has code review discussed, or will they be discussing the potential for more frequent meetings?
They haven't discussed it, but I'm happy to add it to their December agenda.
Okay. Yeah, I think that would be of value. I'm not going to venture to suggest what their consensus would be, but I think there is some value in at least considering meeting more frequently, developing a bit more momentum on these issues. Any other comments, Ms. Dillon?
I just wanted to say that I do value the input that our citizens and our staff liaison give to that committee. And so I don't want them to be bogged down and feel as though they're turning wheels that never actually go forward. So if we can find a process to make the process better, I think I'd be all in favor for that.
Mr. CEO, any thoughts?
Yes, sir. My opinion has always been, seeing as how I used to be one, that we hire city staff for the expertise that they have in doing their jobs. So I guess what I would say, especially to Mr. Harrington's comments, is that if you feel that something is readily changed without a dramatic impact, change it. Bring it to council and say, here's what I think is appropriate to do, and we have the authority then to say yes or no. Kick it over to code review. But I think that we need to rely more on the kind of input that you give us as regards some of these ordinances and so on. It's true that we make ordinances here, that we're the body that sets policy and enacts ordinances, but I think that we rely on staff to provide the kind of input that's necessary for us to successfully do that job. And I don't think it's necessary that everything get the imprimatur of code review before it comes to us for our final stamp of approval. So I guess I'd leave it in the judgment of city staff largely to determine whether you would come to us with a recommendation that we immediately change something, or whether you come to us with a recommendation that this is an issue that perhaps ought to go to code review. So I guess I'm happy to leave it there.
Very good. Councilmember Kamir Sulak?
Yes, I'll quickly agree with what Mr. CEO said. And Mr. Harrington so eloquently, delineated. We trust you, and you're hired to do, professional, specific, and we've given the code review a lot of work to do. I've noticed, and they've done a fantastic job, and don't want to overburden them. So I also agree with your judgment on where it goes, because that's your expertise. I appreciate it. Thanks.
Very good. Councilmember Kraus?
Whatever Mr. CEO said, I thought he wrapped it up pretty nicely. That's what we're paying you for. As long as council can turf it back, if we have oversight, you want that, control to be shifted to different people. And so if we feel that it needs to go back, we'll send it back.
Very good. I think you got your consensus there. Well, if there's nothing further on that point, I believe the last discussion item was added at the request of Mayor Pro Tem Gearbaum. Would you like to kick it off, Councilmember?
Yeah, as we noticed that we've had a lot of things going on in the community, I just wanted to have our Mr. Searle and also Manager O'Toole have a time to talk about what issues they're facing right now. We've had a number of things come up, and really, what can we as council do to provide either additional recommendations, support, policies, or what are we needing in terms of being able to achieve what we're doing? And I think as we come up on our master plan and strategic plan, how we can achieve that in the next coming year would help. And really understanding what problems you're facing right now so that our community understands why there may be delays, why things may be an issue.
If I could get started, I'd like to talk about loose leaf, as this program just about every program from rotting sewers, cleaning catch basins, sign replacement, block pruning could all be paralleled to this. Talk about this as what the challenges DPW is seeing right now. The loose leaf collection for this year is October 17th through December 2nd. The first couple of weeks, the leaves that fell were very low. I'll talk the list of scheduled DPW jobs that started just in the window of leaf collection. We had 2 banner changeouts, the Scarecrow to Veterans, Veterans to Winter, trunk or treat setup and takedown line clearance training that's required, that we have to have, dead end flushing for the water system to maintain water quality, election assistance for setup and takedown. We had Veterans Day, and whether it's a holiday or not, opening day finds us a little bit short on help. We have Thanksgiving on 24th, 25th off. Emergency and anomaly issues during this leaf collection. New meter installations at Bella Terrace and Westgate, 15 of them, right? It's time. We got to, the construction's coming, and we got to get the meters in. The final 30 customer service appointments due to the rate increase. We had 4 burials. That's a lot. We fenced off Monroe Street as that became our property to make it safe. Removal of the racially charged stickers downtown. 11/5, we had a pretty good windstorm. The oaks that normally don't give us our leaves until, late November, gave them to us then. We had a water main break on the 9th. We had to clean up that water main break it happened in a berm with a 40-foot spruce that had to be removed. So we fixed the water main break, got the crew out of there, went back on straight time, cleared that out. On 11/15, we had the bad accident on Michigan Avenue that took out some of our light poles. We had to come back on the 16th to secure the power there. It was unsafe. On 11/17, we had a hit service on Clark, and during that, we also had to do an inspection, Ben, for both the sewer connection, the water connection, and the compaction on that road to make sure that it was back up to our standards. That is kind of a parallel for what goes on in DPW all the time. In the past, our entire staff had a CDL. The industry has changed, and the people coming into our public works has changed. As of right now, we have 2 that do not have a CDL. It's been hard, and we've recruited hard. Thanks, Al. We've had a lot of, we've posted out a couple times to fill the 3 positions. In 2007 and 8, there were 15 maintenance workers working in the field. Today, there's funded positions 13, but we've lost 3 employees over the last couple of years with around 6 years of experience. We replaced them with, 5 months, 10 days, and one that starts next Monday. The 2 that are currently working are the ones without the CDL, but we are training John to get his. The additional challenges that we've had at DPW leading up to this is for the past 4 years, we had 5 returning seasonals that are not there. Despite raising the seasonal rate from $10 to $15, we were still only really able to get 1.5 seasonals to come in and do the lawn cutting. I don't believe that seasonal employees are going to be coming back. A little bit of frowning on a labor job, not being able to have flexible hours, higher rates of pay in lower labor jobs, and we have a lot of Uber and we have a lot of Amazon. We have these deliveries that people can pick their hours, and we have to be open during the business hours. So the industry that we're drawing off is changing. I don't like those challenges, and I don't like that that's the parallel. As Councilwoman Dillon said, we don't want to bring people in and lay them off. We have a declining fund balance. So we did add 1 full-time position, and we'll fill that, but we're not, I don't think we're ready to go and grab a bunch of employees that we may or may not be able to afford to keep around. We don't have a completely written succession plan to show where our staffing level will be in the next 5 years, but it's not hard to get there. But our current challenges are recruiting and retention, CDL training requirements, the overall growth of the city as the city has grown and our staff has shrunk, declining fund balance, right? We do have some mitigating strategies, and some of them are farther along in the process, as in establishing a light facilities maintenance contract. We've got a few uses already right now that would help us out with. Maybe looking at contracting out our non-critical areas of mowing. Establish and utilize a single point reporting tool. I'm not saying let's go and buy a database management system. I know Alcoa is working hard and BSNA is coming along. We already do our water appointment work orders out of there. It's becoming more robust. So if we have a little bit of patience and time to build this up, we can do it sustainably. But that's the challenges with the leaf collection is the challenges every day in DPW. There's a lot of the difference between the catch basins, the sanitary rotting, the sign replacement, and the block pruning is the leaves are up in front and we all see it. The other stuff doesn't get done and it's not as obvious.
Mayor Pro Tem Gurbaugh, can I ask a quick question before I forget? And maybe this doesn't solve the problem. Dean, Councilmember Gurbaugh and I had this conversation not too long ago. And when I first announced leaf collection this fall, you had provided me with an interesting statistic, which is in the state of Michigan, less than 15% of municipalities still provide loose leaf collection. Yeah. It's an extraordinary service that I think our citizens value. And I'm not saying do away with it. But is there any benefit to, in the future years, obviously not changing the schedule that's been established for the 2023 22 season. But is there any value in condensing that schedule a bit in the ensuing years? Does that reduce the pressure that exists on you and your subordinates?
Well, I have to say, shame on me for not modifying our schedule expectation, because as I've only been here for 2 leaf collections, I didn't realize, Mayor, we have never been able to get through that advertised schedule. But the length of time, it almost appears like it probably grew as the seasonal drop has changed. We do pick up leaves for a long time.
Nearly 2 months.
Yeah, I mean, the 10-year average, I mean, we spend a lot of money, a lot of resources. And I know we're behind, right? But every one of the leaves fell after November 5th. We actually have sent as many, all those challenges. We have the same number of loads going to the leaf yard. Actually, we have a few more loads going to the leaf yard right now this year, more than last year. It's just there's more on the road. And we have not been able to get the vertical distance, even though we're getting the volume of leaves. We can't get down the street, and I can't send the crews to another subdivision until we finish the street we're on.
I'm sorry, Mr. Kirby, go ahead.
No, that's fine. I mean, it wasn't so much leaf alone, it's just the ability for our DPW to complete its work and be able to do it. We've known that when we hit an emergency, it shuts us down. It basically, everything has. And I think the example, that water main break, that was never anticipated. It shut down Michigan Avenue, and then the car accident itself, within a week's time, did the same thing. What I'm hoping to and understanding is what we need to do in terms of planning for you. I know we always think that we can throw staff at it, but are there other tools, are there policies, other things that we need to address? And one of the reasons why I wanted to bring this up is because the public needs to understand, because we don't have the ability to communicate as well as we could in the past, either through a newspaper or whatever, they don't understand what's happening and what's affecting your department. And I just need to understand, and for us, is to look at this and bring you, at least you have the same ability as we do with Mr. Briggs, who brings us forward information regarding the wastewater treatment plan and that. We need to understand what's happening with you. But also in this situation, it is addressing how can we function better and address it as we're adding new staff to the building department. And we've added it to the engineering, and we've added it to, we continue to replace existing positions. What do we need to do in order to make your function and your department work better, smarter, and so forth? So I just like this update at this point in time to have that benefit.
Excellent. And just so you know, I also have been in contact with the courts. We're looking at a court program for the summer as well to try and mitigate some of our labor shortages. But again, I believe if we do look at least for a short term and see how it goes, contracting out some of the non-critical areas that we're responsible to mow, and then put our guys back on the sewers, on the more technical jobs that cost more and bring more expertise or require more expertise to do, and we will get there with the work order system. But I don't want to suggest to council that we buy something that may be replaced with BS&A. I mean, they're knocking on the door of having a very good system. The reporting and scheduling, that's on me to get better at. But I will hope to have the patience till we get the tools in place.
I think for us, maybe is understanding what expectations and putting in place either deadlines or requirements or such for you to be able to achieve those type of things and giving you the resources to do that. And that's where I think one of us, we do know the work order system has been something that's outstood for many, many years, and whatever we can do to get that in place so that you can, efficiently and more accurately track and do whatever you need to do, I think is something that we may need to commit to definitely for you. So,
Thank you.
Mr. Delorco?
Yeah, just briefly, I've always thought it's kind of senseless to use skilled labor for unskilled jobs. Is it possible to evaluate looking at somebody to contract to take down banners and mow lawns? Would that be advantageous to the city?
We're knocking on the door of that happening.
Okay.
He's already sent me the proposal, and I had some questions, but I expect something like that will be back to council within the next month.
Yeah.
And that type of cost-benefit consideration is something that Treasurer Cole and I are looking at for lawn mowing next season as well.
Okay, very good. And then has the city ever been engaged with using work detail or work release programs with courts and prisons?
Definitely.
Yep, yep.
So
And-
is
and
that something we can revisit?
I'm working on that now. I've already been in correspondence with the courts for a court program this summer.
Yeah, because a lot of times a judge will say, you're sentenced to 3 weeks of work detail instead of going to jail, and
Yep.
that's, labor that can serve the community for sure.
Yeah, and we would have the nonviolent offender that needs to pay their community service back to us. So we're
Right.
working with the court on that right now.
Raking leaves and golf courses, whatever they need to do that you could use them for.
Yep.
Okay, thanks.
Mr. Seal and then Councilmember Dillon.
Does, back in the day, the court, or not the court, the Department of Corrections had a technical rules violator program where these guys who were out on parole who violated some technicality in their parole were then brought back in for a certain amount of time, and they would send those people out to various communities, I think for a reasonable amount of pay, reasonable for us and reasonable, I guess, for them, with even a supervisor who would direct their work in mowing lawns and doing maintenance like that. Is that TRV program still available?
I don't think it is, and I remember in conversations with Dan before he left, I guess they did a lot of work in the cemetery, a lot of work.
And a lot of that depended on the kind of supervisor they sent with those guys, too.
Yeah.
Mr. Brown was excellent, excellent.
Yeah, right now, I don't have any contacts onto revisiting that, but the court program through the probation department, we're gonna try and get that going for us.
I think part of the big problem there, though, is that if you get individuals coming in, you gotta give them some kind of instruction about what to do and how and where.
Absolutely. It would cost us a union employee overtime, but with 5 or 6 times the man hours.
Okay.
Very good. Councilmember Dillon?
Thank you. I feel like we've hit this cycle where we overpromise, underdeliver right now. And leaf collection is definitely sort of the top of that list. And I understand it's something that we've done in this community for years and years. It's a service that people enjoy. We also are paying for yard waste pickup. And so we may need to find that point where people are raking their leaves. You may also have to bag them to have them picked up. I look at what your crew does. I appreciate it. I live on a street with a lot of trees. And right now, we don't have parking basically on 90% of our street because we have leaves that are there. But I look at your crew, and when they're in full mode, you've got 6 guys out there picking up leaves. And I'm like, is that the best use of our DPW at this point? And the answer is no. Same within the summer, I'm watching 2 guys on riding mowers mow the park up next to my house, where I'm like, this is, as we've talked about, skilled labor out mowing grass. I mean, I think that we are gonna have to look. We look at the banners downtown. I mean, it's not just one guy out there, changing banners. There's rules about who's in a boom, who's down below, who's doing this. And I mean, there's a lot of low-hanging fruit that we really need to grab a hold of at this point and say, you know what? We have essential services that are not getting done or that need our attention. When we talk about the meter change-outs, when we talk about things like that's the pieces that I think we need to focus on. We need to get our meters changed out so that guy that's walking the sidewalks, reading meters, that job is done. And we've recaptured that employee into doing, skilled labor work and such. I just feel like there's a lot of those pieces that we really need to kind of take a really hard look at as a community and say, what is important to us?
Well, and so, I mean, that's where we're at. We've quantified the acreage that we own. We've thought of, it's not to, the recommendation isn't to administration yet, but I don't think we want to lose cutting our cemetery and our ballparks, our assets and our cemetery, right? But the other stuff, yes, it's time to take a look at getting our guys doing block pruning and getting our guys doing storm sewer maintenance every season. This stuff that would cost a lot more. I don't think we're gonna be able to get a contractor to come in and pick up leaves, but we already have one with waste management. Maybe look at shortening our window of it. And I don't know if you guys get the feedback, but not everyone loves loose leaf, because I clean my yard and then those leaves don't get picked up in time and their leaves blow in my yard. So just throwing that out there. It's not as universally loved as we think it is.
And I'll just end by saying that I think the one thing that we really could be doing better as a community right now is that element of communicating with the community about things. I had a conversation this morning with the city manager about this, that over the weekend I received 3 different messages from people saying, the city didn't plow. Why didn't the city plow? It snowed, the city didn't plow. We need to have people understand what our threshold is, when we plow, what we plow, and maybe just set those reminders out there as the season begins. Just remember, this is when you can expect to see plows, or when you will not see plows, when you'll see salting. Are we gonna be using the beet juice thing? Whatever the case may be, it's just to remind them of what that process looks like. And so maybe that would set a better expectation.
Definitely, and I will say I was a little overwhelmed and didn't get the snow policy rehashed as I would have liked to, but if you look on the DPW site, we are pounding information out. And this, if you see what was going on, we were pretty slammed. But yeah, I missed the snow meeting with our guys too. I mean, we want to do that. We want to beat the snow. We want to be ahead of the snow. We want to send all the information out to the residents, and yeah, I missed this one, definitely.
And that's fine, like I said, my thing is help me help you. So if you pass that information, you've got 7 people up here that have social media accounts, that have mechanisms to communicate with the city. We're happy to keep pushing that information out. So if you can provide it to us, we'll keep pushing it out, and then hopefully get people a little bit more on the same page.
Director Searles, can you, I don't mean to be myopic in my outlook this evening, but can you remind us again, so loose leaf collection will end early next week?
December 2nd, but you're supposed to stop putting them out on November 27th.
Okay. And Councilmember Dillon made reference to this, and I received a number of inquiries, and just for your edification, it seems like people on the far west side of town, so probably Saline River Drive and especially Torwood, feel a little underserved with loose leaf collection this season. So I'm sure they're on the schedule for this week, but I just want to make sure that they are. And then I don't want to, we're past 10 o'clock, but as it relates to snow plowing and salting, I actually think we've done historically, or at least during my tenure, a pretty good job of communicating about removing vehicles from the streets. And I noticed again, just this past Sunday and again today, the number of cars in advance of snowstorms that just do not move, and then they're covered with snow, and it makes it more difficult for our crews to properly clear salt and plow the streets. Which leads me to a point, maybe we can have a follow-up conversation about this at a subsequent meeting, but we can communicate all day long, but until there's some sort of ramification or punishment for that behavior, I don't see certain people changing. So I think our approach of trying to be nice and communicate was good. We've done that for a number of years, but I think we're reaching the point now where we need to start citing and subsequently ticketing, because we have people who habitually leave vehicles in the streets during torrential snowstorms.
Would you like me to make that a discussion item at our next meeting and invite Chief Radzik?
I think that would be great. Okay. Any additional questions? Yes, please, Mr. Commander Kastulak.
Yeah, just real quickly, I appreciate this coming forward. This is a lot of good information and really illuminates how hard you and your staff work and how much responsibility and the timeliness of it, that it's a lot of different moving parts, more or less. And I agree with the prioritizing and the cost benefit and figuring out what's the best use of our, of your staff and their time, and not overburdening them too much, because, you got 7 different places to go every day, right? But thank you and your staff for all that's been thrown on them. And I don't rake leaves out onto the street in front of my house, not in 22 years, but thank you.
Thank you all. Director Sherrills, thank you. We look forward to having a follow-up conversation on these points in the ensuing weeks and months. Thank you.
Thank you.
Yep. Appreciate your service. And thank your crews for their efforts as well. Thank you. If there are no additional comments from the dais, we proceed then to the second public comment period under the Open Meetings Act. Any citizen may come forward at this time, make comment or question to City Council. This public comment period will be limited to 3 minutes per person. Anyone who would like to speak is requested but not required to state his or her name and address for the record. Are there any citizen comments? The record will reflect there are none. Then please note our upcoming meetings, one on December 5th and our last of the year on the 19th. If there's nothing further to be brought before City Council this evening, the chair would be delighted to entertain a motion to adjourn at 10:09 p.m.
So moved.
Moved by Kamara Sulek. Is there a second?
Second.
Seconded by Del Orco. All those in favor of adjourning signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, say nay. Ayes have it. Meeting is adjourned. Thank you all. Good meeting.